On this episode of the WildFed Podcast.
A lot of us were willing to talk about death just as much as we want to talk about life. Death is necessary to nourish the living.
We sort of have a gentle taboo about discussing it. You look at primitive societies and people who are touched by unusual death or near-death experiences often become the medicine people.
When a bear was eaten, that person became so powerful that it was unwise to look upon them.
Having spiritual meaning is kind of like a nutrient. Feed that thing, because if you don't, and you become nihilistic, culture erodes, and people become very destructive.
It's not culturally appropriate to talk about the individual animal in these deeply emotional ways.
But I do think we're on the precipice of the emergence of a strong transhuman cult. Neuralink, not feeling that. This party's crap. I'm going to Mars.
Slash and burn.
Yeah, exactly.
Episode number 49 of the WildFed Podcast, Birth, Death, and the Ethics of Killing with Arthur Haynes, is brought to you by Surthrival. Right now at surthrival.com, all elk antler products are 20% off with the coupon code ADAPT20. Elk antler is one of the most regenerative and adaptogenic substances found in the natural world. Made from the rapidly growing velvet antlers of free-ranging elk, elk antler contains growth factors, collagen, stem cells, and many other substances that increase performance, stamina, tissue repair, and accelerate the gains from your training too. It supertunes your metabolism and even modulates your immune system. Go to surthrival.com to learn more and use the coupon code ADAPT20 for 20% off any elk antler products, including Taboo, Surthrival's powerful chocolate, elk antler, and herbal aphrodisiac formula. This episode is also brought to you by Wild Food Warehouse. Wild Food Warehouse carries premium wild rice from the Great Lakes and delivers it directly to your door. This is wild rice season, and though many of us can't be out on the Great Lakes to harvest our own wild rice, Minnesota allows for the commercial harvest of this incredible gluten-free aquatic grain. That means that even if you don't live in a place where wild rice grows, you can still experience this premium wild food. All the rice at Wild Food Warehouse is gathered by canoe using cedar knockers. Those are the traditional wood dowels that are used to bend over the rice stalks and to knock the ripe grains into the boat. The rice is then dried, parched over a wood fire, and winnowed to reveal the beautiful, delicious grains beneath. And Minnesota regulates the wild rice harvest, ensuring the indigenous folks of that region still have access for their subsistence needs and that the resource is maintained for future generations. And remember, foraging wild rice in this way by hand from the canoe actually encourages the spread of rice colonies, since many ripe grains miss the boat entirely and land in the water where they sink to the bottom and germinate, becoming future stocks of wild rice. In other words, all the wild rice at Wild Food Warehouse is sustainably harvested. Get over to wildfoodwarehouse.com and use the coupon code WildFed. It'll get you 10% off your order. Hey, I just want to give a big thanks to everyone that's been sending us pictures of themselves in our blaze orange WildFed trucker hats this hunting season. We just got another restock and all our hats are still on sale until October 15th. So go over to wild-fed.com and grab one for 25% off with the coupon code HAT25. And then tag me in a picture. I love seeing you out on your hunting, fishing, and foraging adventures. I'm Daniel Vitalis, and you're listening to the WildFed Podcast, a show about reconnecting with nature through hunting, fishing, foraging, and food. WildFed. Food is all around you. So today's show goes deep. Last week, I sat down with Arthur Haynes, one of our most frequent and celebrated guests. Arthur's an author, botanist, plant taxonomist, registered Maine guide, hunter, angler, forager, and primitive skills practitioner who lives in Western Maine. Ever since we first met more than a dozen years ago, Arthur and I have been having conversations like this one, wide-ranging and often as deep as they are broad. For me, talking with him is a kind of cognitive catharsis since we just sort of get each other. That means that a lot of interesting content builds up between conversations, and it makes our interviews really, really interesting. In this conversation, we get into some pretty personal and intimate stories. Stories of reproductive loss, stories of birth, and ultimately, stories of death. And that leads us into a candid conversation about what it means to kill, to be a predator on our landscape. As hunters, we, like so many other animals, kill to eat. Yet, unlike other animals, we wrestle with the ethics of killing, especially bigger, older, and what many of us perceive as more sacred animals. In particular, we're talking about what it means to kill a bear, how we view and interact with these incredible animals, and how we both simultaneously love them on their own merits as living creatures, yet how and why we also choose to hunt and ultimately to kill them for our own and our family's subsistence. I think you're really going to like this episode. These topics aren't for the timid, and this conversation isn't light listening. You'll definitely get to know us a bit better, and after this podcast, you'll understand how we view life, death, and killing too.
Arthur Haynes, great to have you back on the show, man. It's always awesome to come out and talk to you, and your episodes are some of the most loved.
I'm glad that is still the case.
It's still the case. I don't know how it will be after this one, but it is
Right.
currently still the case. Can you describe kind of where we're sitting?
Yeah. We're sitting in the forest. We are next to a small stream named Child's Brook, which is kind of the namesake of this area. We sometimes refer to it as Child's Brook Valley. And for anybody who has been to Wilder Waters, it's the valley that you see from any of the peaks around here. And probably 6 yards away or so is a stone that's kind of out of place. It's kineorhyolite, which is a type of stone that comes from the Moosehead Lake region of Maine. And there is a small body that's buried there who was Sarah and I's firstborn son, who lived about 8 hours. And I requested that we come here to this spot to do the podcast because Kineo was born on October 9th. And without any planning, without any attempt to do so, the very first bear that I ever shot in my life was on his birthday. And the second bear that I shot in my life, with no planning, was also on October 9th. And we had been out before, and we had been helping other people and so on.
Yeah, we'd hunted a bunch those
and,
years.
And it just kept coming down to this October 9th date. So to me, Kineo's memory is connected now to the memory of bear hunting for me. And so we came to this location for that reason. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing us here.
Thanks for bringing us out here. Wow, that was a really impactful story when it happened. I'm curious now. And congratulations, Farrah is beautiful.
Thank you.
So, both your daughters are incredibly beautiful. But I'm curious now that you've had some time, what that event in your life, what it means to you guys, or how about this? Like, how do you guys frame it? Because you could be ultra pragmatic or ultra spiritual about it, or you could sort of come up with, people tell whatever story works for them, but you have a very penetrating mind and a scientific mind as well. I'm curious how you guys tell that story and from a meaning perspective, having lost someone so young.
I'm pausing because I'm trying to figure out how deep we go on this story.
I say we go deep. I think that's one of the beautiful things about a long form chat is that we can.
So there's two parts of this maybe to mention. One, when Sarah first became pregnant, I think that she was much younger than she is now. And I kind of mean that in more of an emotional state. She was very swayed by the stories that she heard from others. And literally every single person told her, your life is over. You're going to become a mom and you're going to have no time to yourself. Your children are crying. You're stressed out of your mind. And this went deep, into her being, that this is a tough time. Not to mention, she was mothering Samara, as well as Samara's mom, Nicole, right, part-time, and she understood the stresses of being a stepmother, and that was all weighing in. She's in a relatively new relationship with me. She doesn't know that she can trust me, and she's going to carry the baby to term, and we're going to raise this child, but there's just a lot of stress around it. But she's planning for it. We have a midwife. She's really focusing on her diet. She's incorporating things, nutritional elements that we might not try to get all the time. But, there's a baby coming. We need to do this. We're going through the motions.
You mean like strange fish oils and livers and things like that?
And those kinds of things. And making sure that some of those chelating agents like chlorella are an everyday part of the diet for her, And Kineo is born. The midwife notices that there is a a lack of vitality. There isn't a continued nursing sort of.
Born right here at home.
Yeah, I mean, we can almost see.
Yep.
Right here. Sarah, all her births have been outdoors right here on the property. Farah was born next to the picnic table that we frequently sit at when we're cooking outdoors, you know. And ultimately, 8 hours later, Kineo passes. Or I should say, they're planning to put him into a controlled deep freeze coma so that they can try to work some Western medicine magic on him. And his pupils have been dilated for a while. His lungs have filled with fluid, and he can't supply his brain with oxygen. And finally, Sarah says, "Stop, just stop." And the lead physician says, "That sounds like a perfectly appropriate request." And they just leave the room. Wow. And so that night, I have this really crazy dream of this greenish, hunched, humpback woman come in and take his soul. And I recognize who this lady is.
Hair just stood up on the back of my neck when you said that.
This lady is a figure in Wabanaki lore called Bookjean's Quast, Jugwoman. And I don't tell anybody this for a couple of years. I thought that would be really too much for Sarah to hear. But we bury him, and he's over here, his body. And what grows on his grave are 3 or 4 plants of something called, the English translation is Jugwoman's baby.
Wow.
Whoa. And I'm not making that up. This is a real thing that happened. And this is Jack in the Pulpit.
Yeah.
And the burning sensation that you get when you eat the raw parts of this plant come from this proteolytic enzyme that's damaging your tissues. And that was said to represent the fire of a child that was thrown into a massive fire to repay Jugwoman for these evil deeds that she has done. So she takes Kineo's spirit, and yet that's what grows on his grave. So that's kind of like really crazy. But we have come to understand that Sarah, and collectively we were not prepared to have a child. We were too busy with Samara. And it was offered up by a friend of ours, actually, a very close friend of Sarah's, and I think she and her came to a potential understanding here that Kineo gave his life. He gave his life to protect Sarah, who would have been buried in stress. He gave his life so that Farah could be born to a healthy woman who understood that nothing she heard about pregnancy, she was told it's going to be this, and none of it was true. Sarah had a fabulous pregnancy. The only thing that bothered her and worried her were all the things that she heard.
Yeah.
And as a mother, she can't believe others don't want to be a mother. Like, it's the most amazing part of her life. And she's now at this point, in my opinion, that what people say don't just automatically sway her anymore, because she's having so much of her life go different from what everyone told her it was going to be. She just looks at her baby and she's in bliss.
Yeah, I never seen her so happy as today when she walked up to us. You saw that, Greg?
Yeah, that's Sarah now that she has a baby.
She's so happy.
But she
brought
needed
us that hot chocolate, that chaga hot chocolate. I was like, who are you?
It's like a permanent smile.
Yeah, it's just like from ear to ear, you know. She seems so happy.
So the fact that Kineo's birthday has been commemorated multiple times by unintended successful bear hunts on those days, he's connected to me as part of this bear clan, if you will. That's one of the most important animals to me, emotionally, spiritually. How about just admiration for what they can do?
Yeah. Wow. You know, Avani and I, we've got 6 standing stones at the house for the children we've lost, the miscarriages that we've had. And so I know about a little something, at least, from a male perspective, what it's like for a woman who has given birth but does not have a baby. And that's a thing that our culture doesn't acknowledge very much. It's not easy to talk about. It's complex to explain. You almost don't want to bring it up because of how other people are going to respond to it, and you don't want to make them uncomfortable, so you can bury it and everything. So I'm curious how those couple of years were after.
It's like what you're describing, Daniel. People would bring it up like, oh, you were pregnant. How was your baby?
What happened? Yeah.
And it's like, oh, he died. And they'd be like, oh, my God, like as if they had put their foot in their mouth. And we're like, no, it's not like that. You don't have to feel bad, because the one thing that a lot of us in the circle that we're in, we're willing to talk about death just as much as we want to talk about life.
Yeah.
Death is necessary to nourish the living, and the living nourish the death.
Yeah.
And
no one outruns it.
And nothing outruns it. Not permanently.
No.
So then we ran into that a lot. But you also get that language like, oh, I'm sorry you lost him. It's like, no, I know exactly where he is. There's no loss. He's dead.
Yeah.
And it's okay that he's dead, because, I mean, I was just at a funeral for a family member. And you go and you look, and there's these 2 gravestones, and they say Haynes on them. And I'm like, who are these people? Oh, they're children that people lost. Like, this was a regular thing.
Regular thing. Thank you. We were just speaking to a friend who had done some aid work in Haiti. He was describing that after the hurricane that they had, that this area he was in, 1 in 4 women were losing their children in childbirth. And I was like, it's powerful. It's like, yeah, wow. But I go, like, that is historically the normal number of children to die this way. If not, actually, that might be below the actual number of historically. And so we've talked about this before, but we run into this interesting thing now where we have these competing ideas that we somehow try to hold in our minds. And that one is, we should never let any children die. The other is, oh man, there's just way too many people. The population's way too high. It's like, well, doesn't it seem to it seems like there's an obvious thing here, but coming to terms with letting people go. I want to just go back on that reproductive grief thing for 1 second, because I just want to acknowledge the different kinds that I've seen, and I'm sure I'll leave something out, and people listening might have experienced something that I won't mention, but we have lost children at various stages of pregnancy, and Avani's given birth to very small people.
I've seen what you've shown.
Yeah, very small people.
Right.
At home, and that's something that would be more common, except that the DNC procedure, you would never see that. You go to the hospital and they do sort of a removal process for you, and it's clean and tidy, but you don't actually get to see the child that you made. And for me, it was extremely powerful, especially with Orion. To see him really was a moving experience for me. So I'm glad that we did it that way. So I know people and have experienced losing children from pregnancy, headed up towards full term. I have a friend who lost twins at 9 months. Very powerful. I have friends who, someone in my family lost a baby at 30 days. So I've seen it like various iterations of that early loss. We have a good friend who lost a child at 1 year, which is just like, it's very hard for me to get my head around. But Sarah's situation's so unique. The same day she gave birth. So she became a mom that day, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get to. She had no child, but she was a mom by all definitions, you know? And so it must have been confusing to navigate all the competing emotions and those expectations from people, and those, all those things that come up. But
not to mention, she would run into many other women who, by virtue of nothing more than they were a few years older, you could tell they often wanted to be the alpha in the conversation. And it's like, this is a really important experience. Like, you guys should be just listening to each other now, and not one like talking down to the other. This is a really powerful experience that changes and matures a human. And I just noticed that a lot with people wanting to be respectful, but not actually give that event the full weight of what that possibly means to an individual.
It's hard for the other person to sit with that too, I understand. I mean, I try to have compassion for the weird responses you get from people. But everybody I know has been through childhood grief, reproductive grief. One of the things they bring up is how challenging the attempts at sensitivity can feel from other people. And also, I think when you're touched by death, I like you and I spend a lot of time talking about peoples of the past as a model for peoples of the future. And you look at primitive societies, and people who are touched by unusual death or near-death experiences often become the medicine people, And so this is what's interesting to me with Sarah, is that because she experienced that, maybe that was a norm in the past, but it's not today, which means she's touched by something that less people today are experiencing, which means it propels her medicine forward. And I could feel a real difference in her today. It's just really interesting.
It's totally true. And Sarah, we talk about human biological norms.
Mm-hmm.
That might be our movement, our diet, our spirituality, whatever the case might be. What light pollution we would and would not have experienced, and how that impacts our health, and all the topics that we've discussed at length and times. And Sarah recognizes that this is something that many women would have experienced, and has a not looking forward to it ever happening again, but there is a gratitude, mm-hmm. in a sense, that she has felt what peoples have felt around the world.
Yeah. To legitimize a worldview that she has.
Yeah. I should also try to mention, and I think you're also aware, that Samara, who was at the time during Sarah's pregnancy. So Samara's my now 7-year-old daughter that Sarah mothers part-time.
She looks amazing, by the way. I hadn't seen her in a while. It's really cool to see her today.
Tall. And she kept saying, "Don't worry, Sarah, you can just have another baby." And she kept saying this over and over, kind of like, "Why are you saying this?" And she said, "Well, something's going to happen, and don't worry, you can have another."
She was saying that before.
Oh, long before. No. Everyone thought it was a girl. I thought it was a girl. Sarah thought it was a girl. Everyone thought it was a girl. Samara was the only person who always referred to Kineo as a he. And so she didn't just nail the gender, but she knew something was going to happen to him. She repeatedly told Sarah, "It's okay, you can have another baby." Wow. And we don't know. And then I don't recall exactly, maybe it was a week or two before Kineo's birth, Samara wakes up in the bed, because we're co-sleeping, and she wakes up screaming, and she says, "We were in a hospital room, and I saw Kineo die." This literally happened. So there are so many things that have happened around Kineo's death and subsequent things that came later, that it starts to open you up to not irrationality, but that there are some things that simply because it can't be explained doesn't make it real. Mm-hmm. Because we lack the scientific terminology currently to explain it, doesn't mean that at some point somebody won't say, "There's a perfectly rational explanation for this." And I think there's a lot of people that say, yeah, there is, and it doesn't have to be framed in a scientific perspective, and I get that.
But I get where you're coming from, where someday in the future, you would imagine, unless we have a retrograde experience, we're certainly we're facing one down right now.
Right.
But let's say we could continue on with so-called progress. You would imagine a confluence at some point of science and mysticism,
as there have been in many places. We have seen Native American practices essentially exonerated as something more than just superstition. Over and over and over again. The smudging that is done by cultures around the world has been shown to literally purify the space and reduce bacterial populations for many, many hours, for over a day. Like, it wasn't just figuratively purifying.
But then you spiritualize that and ritualize that, and it looks now, when you encounter it and you don't have that science, now it looks like pure mysticism. By the way, I want to go back and say I respect the opinions of people who would say things like, "Why are you even trying to make this scientific? You don't need to." It's like,
I get that too.
It's like, totally get you. Try on my neural tree for a minute, because I got a lot firing up there. I can't handle that. I gotta go deeper than that.
Comfortable in the time that I have known you, using whatever explanation framework we want to use.
That's really cool, because that's where I wanted to go next and say, actually, I want to touch on that in a moment. I want to go back, because I don't want to leave this story about Ivani and I just hanging, but I want to say that I get a lot of like DMs from people or whatever. People email me and say, when are you going to have a little Vitalis? Like, you need to have a kid, And it's like, we've been through all this stuff. And so people don't know that, and they're right.
Of course, right.
And, but for me, I'm like, man, I had 6 kids. I was there for all the births, and they're all buried in my backyard. And the work that I do and the childhood that I had, I feel really, really grateful that I get to carry on the work that I'm doing. I feel like it's a gift. Mm-hmm. And for her, she, as a teacher, and right now, in the current work environment that we're experiencing in 2020, she's got a full roster of incredible kids that she's educating, privately. And it's giving us the ability to hold this space for all these kids at a level of intention that we couldn't do if we had one running around our house. So it's like freed us up a lot. So there's a real gift in that, and we're so happy. So I just want to make sure I don't leave it sounding like we're in some kind of grief about it. We have definitely experienced grief about it, and that's been incredible too. It's taken us and our relationships so much deeper. It's like 6 iterations of that brings you so close,
Well, because I have this experience with Sarah, that I obviously hope never to have an experience like that with any other person.
Right.
That's our unique past.
Yeah. I mean, you navigated those waters, so a lot of other things don't look so severe when they come along, like, a crunch here or some challenges here. It's like, well, we've been through much more.
Right.
I want to also bring up that journey you were just talking about. It's been so amazing to watch your life story as I've known you unfold, because you were a much more, at least verbally and communicatively, you were less inclined in the past to go into areas that might be considered sort of spiritual, or where you couldn't fully explain something. And I've watched a huge shift in you over the years, to the point that I'm like, but the thing is I don't think it's done anything to take away from your abilities of observation, or your ability to be, what was the term you used? A credible witness you used once for me.
Yes.
You're a very credible witness, and you obviously can separate when you need to for work, let's say, mysticism and the pure current sciences. But you seem like so much more of a whole person, because you have, like a lot of people only have one or the other.
I would agree.
When you have both, it makes you a very whole person. So I just, as we get to where we're going with the conversation today, I don't know if you want to address that at all, about the journey from sort of scientist to, I don't want to say mystic, because you're still a scientist, but you didn't have that mystic part so much before.
It started, or maybe I should say, it started and it's coming back around again, as I read the cultural stories, what our society would call the mythology of Native Americans, and reading their creation stories, their hero stories, their explanations for various things. And we've come to this point in social justice where we have to at least feign that those are credible, and we call them other ways of knowing, as opposed to it's a way of knowing. Right. We call it the other ways of knowing, which is still a little bit pejorative if you really think about it.
It'll be seen that way in 20 years, guaranteed.
And I hope so. I've actually come to an understanding in my life now that I'm happy to accept all the creation stories of that place, not the ones pushed on people's, but where they were formed out of a people who interacted with the land. And I'm happy to see that science, and in particular Native American stories, are different ways of explaining the exact same thing. They do frequently line up more often than we recognize. And I just see science has a story to tell, and the indigenous peoples of the world have a story to tell, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, unless you assume that they have to be, unless you assume that your reality has to be everyone else's reality.
Yeah, you could almost have a thing like Like, oh, great creation myth. How many years did it function before total annihilation of all the peoples? Like if like if you're the Aboriginal peoples of Australia, it's like, oh, you guys did 60,000 years on this one? Okay. That one's like a golden oldie. We're going to keep that one, It's like,
I think of that many times, Daniel, to think about how scientific creation stories are often presented in a way that don't create wonder, and they definitely don't create reverence for creation.
could I just say I'll let you finish here in a sec, but I just want to say that that you could say they engender nihilism.
And I don't disagree with that at all. Essentially, our scientific stories of creation often simply state that the existence that we experience is chemical and physical reaction, and you are bound to hold yourself to no standard of interaction with any of the existence. And, as I've heard anthropologists speak about, and I have loved, if your creation story tells you that that mountain is a pile of metal ore, you will flatten it for profits. If your creation story tells you that that mountain is where your deity lives, it will be a place of reverence that will be protected by your peoples. And they're both true at the exact same time. I just wish that we could somehow merge these, which is that whole human that I think you're talking about, so that we have people who use both intellect and emotion to guide them at the same time, and not just one or the other, because they could become unbalanced.
Yeah, and I would say, looking at what we've, I've never been like a field anthropologist or anything. I don't want to give that impression when I say when I've like studied about indigenous people. Obviously, I mean like in my living room, but I wouldn't say that they take science and they take mysticism and they use both. It's more like their worldview was both of those.
Well, there was a pragmatic, we have to feed ourselves, we have to stay warm, we need clothing, somebody has to do work, right? You're not just going to pray and things appear. We're pragmatic, working peoples with a deep reverence for the gifts of the land that we inhabit. There was both, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I just think that it's healthier to, as long as what you choose to believe isn't leading to destructive behaviors. But otherwise, it's almost like having spiritual meaning is kind of like a nutrient. If you don't have that, our friend was talking to us the other day, Grant, about a structure in our brain that I didn't follow up on what she was saying, but I liked it metaphorically anyway. She was saying there's a structure in the brain that generates this idea of a God, or it's why we believe in a God. They've traced it to some structure in the brain. I don't know if this is true, but I was thinking a lot about that. Like, feed that thing, feed it, because if you don't and you become nihilistic, culture erodes and people become very destructive.
Yeah, and feeding it doesn't mean that your religion has to be practiced above all others, right? There's all kinds of things that we can, but feeding it can just come from a deep reverence for the creation that we find ourselves inhabiting. You don't have to create a bureaucracy around this. You can just experience creation through a sense of wonder and gratitude.
Things we've talked about a lot over the years, things tend to become the caricature opposite of what they intend to be.
Yes.
And so if you look at
I love the word that I first heard you use, the opposame.
Yeah, the opposite. If you look at like what Jesus said, for instance, or what Jesus is purported to have said, and you look at the Vatican, you're like, come on, no. You're doing everything different than he said. Everything. Like, how much gold did you save up? Because it's like, that's the opposite of the message. And then where it was like, keep people in illiteracy. So they can't even tell that you're doing that. It's really ironic that we've gotten here a couple thousand years later and you see, it became something opposite. And I just think that that's very common. But, going back to, we were talking before about people's discomfort with death, which I think when we look particularly at those big monotheistic religions, they tend to be a placation for the fear of death. So they give you this idea of this real cushy spot you get to go to, so don't worry, kind of a thing. they seem like peasant religions very often to me. Compared to something from a tribal world where people are working together in community more. But those seem to be less about trying to placate your concerns about death, right? Those indigenous religions.
The indigenous stories that I've read that come from here, from Maine, from the Donland, death is a prominent piece of these. Their children's stories feature death
right.
all the time,
right.
as not to tuck it away, hide it away, and then let people grapple with that on their own. I mean, I couldn't imagine what, say, Kinneo's death would have been like within an intact indigenous community where you have elders that could speak to the meaning and help people grieve in a really productive way. I just think that would be a very different circumstance.
And you would have seen quite a few of those deaths yourself. So
from an early age.
And that goes back to what we were saying before, is that, Sarah, for instance, might have known many women who'd lost children and not known she'd known them, because people don't wear a badge around explaining it, and because we sort of have a gentle taboo about discussing it, then there isn't that. So we don't know who's been. It's very similar with people who've been sexually abused as children, where, I sometimes think about that. Like, you're in a room with people, and it's like, wow, I wonder how many people here have been sexually abused. I wonder how many people in this room are sexual abusers. You know what I mean? Those kind of things where that stuff, because it's not out, we don't actually know. So you don't know that people around you could be a support to you.
Yes.
Because because we all do our nuclear family thing in our own little bubbles,
Right.
And I also, this is going to seem like a kind of a harsh transition, but I'm going to try to bring it around. So it's going to seem a little jagged at first. The piece of stone that sits on Kinneo's grave comes from the Moosehead Lake region, Mount Kinneo.
Yes.
You first brought me there. And can you talk a little bit about that stone and what it was used for, and its importance to this region and even outside this region?
The stone, Kinneo rhyolite, as I understand, is a a type of volcanic rock. This particular rhyolite has properties like chalcedonies, and this is a general term for stones that have certain glass-like properties, so that force that is either pressed or struck on them travel through them. In other words, they're nappable. So if they are struck, rather than crumbling, if that place that's struck on the stone, and it's called the platform by nappers, is properly prepared, you can remove long flakes of stone and kind of generally predict what will be removed, so that now you have an ability to shape this stone into points and blades and scrapers and other tools that you need, which would be really hard to do with stones that are not like chalcedonies. So this stone is one of the most important stones that is known from Maine. The stone was gathered by Paleo Indians and modern natives and traded throughout the region. This stone, and I wish I knew the distance, the furthest distance this has been found away from those sites, but it's in other states and provinces.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's so far away, carried by foot. It wasn't driven.
As somebody who ships products around the country, I have a sense of what it costs to move things and their weight and bulk, because it's a formula of weight and volume.
Yeah.
And so you start thinking about carrying stone that far,
And indigenous people, when they would travel to these places, would at the very least do some shaping into what would be called preforms. By getting something into the very rough shape, you would remove tremendous amount of weight and volume, and then you may finish those where you are camped, in your settlements. The local indigenous story, which I can't do justice, but I'll just share briefly, is that Mount Kinneo, which is it looks like an island, but it's a very narrowly connected peninsula, kind of in the center of Moosehead Lake.
Which we approached by canoe. I'm
That's
sure
right.
you can come around that peninsula from the other
side.
side.
You can. It's literally like 10 yards wide at one point,
Okay.
is the body of a fallen cow moose that Galuskab, the cultural hero, killed, the first moose that was ever killed, and her body formed the nappable stone that was to be used by the indigenous.
What'd he kill her with?
He killed her with that stone, and she became that stone.
Wow.
And she had a calf who also became other peaks, and there's a whole story that goes to this, which I don't feel I should tell, except to say that she is the body of a fallen giant cow moose who became the nappable stone used by the indigenous.
Which is probably one of the most important natural resources, because to access many natural resources, you would have needed this stone.
Think of how important metal is to us. Mm-hmm. It was their metal.
Right. Okay. So I'm picturing using this stone. It's like, I would almost imagine 90%, maybe more, would be to use against or on organic materials. In other words, you're making adzes to cut trees, you're scraping hides, you're cutting or working fibers with it, you're making arrowheads for projectiles for hunting animals or for fighting, in other words, defending your community. And so this stone is used for killing. And I want to that's how I'm trying to wrap it back around from what we're saying, because I want to talk about our hunts today, and we're in the modern world. We're using more modern materials, and we don't have, we come from these sort of orphan lineages, but our needs are so similar today, and they always will be. And I want to talk about how you, in your experience, how human beings wrap their head around the fact that we are a predatory species. And even that word predatory.
You mean they don't?
Yeah. You hear the word predatory, it sounds, in a human context, it almost always...
Well, that's a sexual, a pedophile, a creep. Yeah. But we are predators. Yeah. And even many of the people who say, I am not a predator, are still consuming animal foods that was raised through animal husbandry, which is just a distorted form of predation.
They're also like the kind of people who still put mouse traps in their basement. They still swat mosquitoes. They're okay with the fact that lots of animals die for their vegetables to be grown. It's just I find what people get most bent out of shape over is like the idea that you would intentionally want to be the one to participate. That you want to go and exercise your abilities as a predator. That makes some people really uncomfortable.
Right. And it's our biological norm to do so. Every hunter-gatherer culture around the world participated in preying on other species of animals. And of course, depending on where you go, and it varied by season, but sometimes it was exclusively predation for long periods of time because their climate offered them no plant foods.
Right. Yeah, we kind of see that there are traditionally, and when I say traditionally, man, I'm not talking about Amish people. When I say traditionally, I mean like the last 300,000 years and more as the genus is older, but there are more instances of people eating closer to a 100% meat-based diet than there are instances of people's living closer to 100% plant-based diet.
Right, except for tiger nuts. Sorry.
You got to explain that reference there.
For people that don't know, there's this one particular producer makes these tubers of this flat sedge, Cyperus esculentus. It grows around the world. And they said, this was 80% of humans' diet.
Yeah, 80% of your ancestors' diet.
Yeah,
it's like,
you mean like 80% of humans ate this for 80% of their existence? Like, I don't know what you mean.
Where were these people that subsisted 80% on tiger nuts?
We laugh at that all the time. It's kind of like the MCTs. They're 18 times stronger than coconut oil at doing what?
Yeah, lifting things? Like, what is it?
That's all it says.
Yeah, it's like, I need some context.
But for me, it's actually really vital to participate in human biological norms because I am not trying to transcend what it means to be a human.
Ooh, now we're going deep. Because because we're at the precipice now where the new religion isn't, it's been 2,000 years since Christianity. It's not like going to see a tremendous resurgence as a religion of the public. I don't expect that. What I do think we're on the precipice of is the emergence of a strong transhuman cult. And we're seeing, I enjoy hearing what Elon Musk has to say about culture. I find it interesting. I think he's an interesting character. But bro, Neuralink, like I'm not feeling that. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Vaguely.
Okay.
Well, I haven't. I don't have details.
In addition to like going to Mars, which I would say is another really strong transhuman pursuit.
I want to leave my Earth mother so bad.
So bad. So bad. Right. I want to go destroy Mars next. This party's crap. I'm going to Mars.
Slash and burn.
Yeah, exactly. So, he's working on, a machine interface. And he's like his justification for it, is, if I understand it, is that we simply don't have the ability to process the amount of incoming information we need through the current means, typing with your fingers, looking with your eyes. Yes. We need a faster uplink. And so we're getting to that place where people are going to make irreversible changes to themselves in order to merge with machines.
Which keep in mind that our change in ecology from hunter-gatherers to agriculturalists to industrialists has made changes to humans. Mm-hmm. We know this, right? We have all kinds of visible changes to our anatomy, to our worldviews. And so this is just going to be yet another layer of separation from nature.
Yeah, but I would say, if I was going to try to make an analogy, it's sort of like with let's say, CRISPR technology that's being used for genetic modification now. Because you can make the argument that the domestication of maize from teosinte is a form of genetic modification.
Right.
But it was done through breeding.
Right.
But then when we start to genetically modify, you'll often have the modifiers will say, oh, this is just an extension of what we have always done. And you're like, well, it's quantitatively different.
Yeah, because you're moving genes from different organisms, not the same species where you're trying to get certain genes to come together. You're taking genes from organisms that are in different kingdoms of life and putting them into another species.
Right.
It's very different.
Yeah, and the first is a bit like, we're going to essentially draw out of an organism a phenotype that fits the environment that it thinks it's going into, right? So you get it to express something that was there. Right.
As opposed to putting something new in it.
Correct, from a trans-species implant.
Yes.
So I kind of see we're doing something similar, where this would be different than the fact that we've developed the printing press. This is fundamentally different, right? And so it's just something I don't love. And yet, if it was as simple as like, hey, this cohort is going to Mars, this cohort is doing the computer uplink, and this cohort's going to be the control group who stays on Earth and lives a traditional life way, so that we know we kind of have that in the bag too. But it's it won't be like that, right?
No, because every level of transcension from what it means to be a biological wild human, the new cohort wants to abolish the old ways.
Correct, and use its resources.
That's right.
I remember prior to COVID, sometimes you and I would laugh at the sort of archetype that we would see in the Hunger Games as the people of the Capitol. And it'd be like, wow, it kind of does look like that if you turn on Fox or CNN. Like, they kind of look like that. Like, all that funny makeup, and like, you look at our celebrities and it had that look. But now, where it's like, wow, I really can see. Because when we first started to hear about the novel coronavirus, and you and I were texting, and I was more on the like, I'm going along with it until I see what it is. And you were more like, I don't know, dude. I kind of been reading about this thing. I'm not seeing. You were looking at the virus itself, and you were like, I just don't see this as being able to produce numbers to justify these decisions. And I actually haven't talked to you really much lately, so I'm not sure where you're at with it now, and it'll be fun to talk about. But regardless of what it is, we have just. what's that saying? Oh, it's something like in some decades it's go by and it's only like months have passed, and some months go by and it's like decades have passed. It's something like that. I'm butchering that.
Yeah.
But it's like a decade past this year. I mean, the world's not going back to how it was. Maybe the masks thing dies off at some point, or maybe the virus issue, whatever, resolves in the eyes of the governments, but the world's not going back. These are irreversible changes, and the new generation is going to come into power like every generation does, and they have a very different worldview. So the world's changing, and we are entering into something new, and it's not going to be something we can. We're not going back to like the Gen X life.
Yeah.
I think I was just I'm reading this book by Neil Howe. I don't know if you've ever seen this book, The Fourth Turning. Really, really powerful stuff that looks at the last 500 years of essentially American history through the lens of generations, the archetype of generations, and a repeating cycle that lasts about 80 years, and it's extremely compelling. Written in 97, and they made incredible predictions about right now that are happening right now. But he's a demographer; he's still around. And it's interesting to read about Gen X, our generation, because we were what he calls a throwaway generation. So our parents had come through the awakening of the 60s and 70s, and they didn't want a parent. So we were sort of cast out on our own. And he points out that during that era, the movies about kids were movies like with Damien, or Children of the Corn, or Rosemary's Baby. We could go on and on. Chucky, the evil kids. And then because generations tend to be the opposite of the generation that they just followed, as soon as the millennials were born, it went to kids are ultra special, and the movies went all to these beautiful kids who were angels, right? And it completely switched. This generation, the millennials, and that term millennial was coined by this author, which is interesting.
Oh, nice.
He's talking about how this is a really risk-averse generation because they've been told how special they are, and they've been treated so special, and everything's been kind of handed to them given the circumstances of the world at the time. They notice that they're not the extreme sport type like we were. Like you did extreme sports, I did extreme sports, my wife did extreme sports. We were like risk-taking. We didn't care about government programs, handouts, money from the government. We were just like rugged individualists, survivalists, But this next generation is nothing like we were. Absolutely different.
I would say not only are they risk averse, but they push that you too are not allowed to take risks. In other words, that every human living on the planet should be safe and comfortable all the time.
I see that. Yeah, and I would say a lot of it's because they're very communal, because they were raised with the internet. And so the millennials are much more likely to want everyone to wear a mask than the Gen X and boomers are, who seem to be more at risk. If this is a real virus causing these real problems, those are the folks at risk. But they're less likely to have their freedoms infringed, whereas the millennials, who are not at risk, want everybody to be on board. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Yeah. By the time this thing dies off and these folks are coming in, we're seeing it now, the Dan Crenshaws and the AOCs coming into, government, like the world's changed. So
for me, there's two important things on this. That idea that we need to be safe, you cannot take risk, right? Because we all need to be safe. When will the first parents be sued because their child was climbing a tree and fell out?
This year, probably.
And you should not have allowed your child to do that. Yeah. Or if you're willing to accept that people die and something happens to your child, it's something that other people considered too risky, suddenly that society is coming on you. So that's one issue, but also that certain other beings will be treated in the same way. Now, it's not going to be insects, it's not going to be mice, it's not going to be fish, but it will be bears.
Yeah.
And you are not allowed to do anything to this animal because it's starting to get pretty close to the human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we just put out a podcast from Newfoundland where we were talking about sealing up there and exploring what the response of the rest of the world is to Newfoundland's traditional seal hunt. And the woman we were speaking to, who's, I would say she's soft-spoken, she's very understanding, she's very kind, she's got a very liberal type personality, but she was like saying to us in their endearing Newfoundland accent.
I love it, by the way.
She was saying that, this is Claire Dawn Fowler I'm talking about. She says, she's talking about the Disneyfication of animals. And she says, look, like if you get too close to a seal, she goes, it'll tear the face off you. And it's like,
oh no,
yeah.
I've seen their teeth up close. One, they're like that black, they're covered with that oil,
Yeah.
and they're big. Like this animal would hurt people.
Right, and they're some of the ones we see. I'm like, that's got to be a 600-pound seal. So it's interesting. Let's say with their hunter, their specialist hunter, the great white shark. Very easy to look at that animal. That's a charismatic animal, but it's not a cuddly animal. So nobody thinks like that you're gonna hug it. But she was saying that people try to get way too close to the seals there. And she's like, the tourists come and they think they can hug one, and she's trying to explain like you have been given a very wrong impression of who this animal is. And while watching any mammal lose its life is jarring to us, I think as mammals,
Yes,
particularly when we haven't been around it, so we're extremely sensitive to it.
Well, it's been hidden from us.
Correct.
Because we don't even
Correct.
see our own slaughterhouses.
And I
right?
struggle to use the word desensitized because.
Oh, I understand what you're saying.
But I
Yeah.
want to say it for the listener. It's
Yeah.
like, it's very easy to say, well, once I started hunting, I got desensitized to that. But actually, I should have been born with this. And
An acceptance that death happens.
correct. So it's actually that the other person has been hypersensitized to it.
Right.
Because I see with like Samara's a great example of she doesn't seem phased by blood or organs or
we
an animal
bring
being
the
broken
animal
down.
back, and
So
there's
people will
just-
be like,
she's
how
part
could
of
you
it.
do that in front of a child? It's like, she's helping, But anyway, this sort of Disneyfication of certain animals.
That's such a great
and
term.
Bears are another. I think bears are actually probably the prime example for it. There is so many cartoon talking bears. And so we're in this place where this is an animal that has been traditionally hunted around the world. Man, you must have saw that cave bear that they found the other day. Did you see that?
Oh, no, tell me.
Oh, fully intact nose, skin, eyes, fully intact.
How
came out
old
of
was it?
permafrost. Man, I want to say
30?
over 37,000 years old or something like that. I think that we
Can
don't have
I
to
leave
conclusive-
this? I want to go see that.
Dude, it's amazing. It's a juvenile. It's not a huge bear.
It doesn't
But
matter.
I mean, I was like, I'm looking at it going like, I want that skull. Like, how do I get that skull? But I've even heard that. Well, we know that the cave bears people were hunting cave bears and eating cave bears, right? We know that potentially the short-faced bear is who locked people out of North America for a while, right? Bears and humans have this long-term relationship, and bear hunting goes back. What, 65, 70? I think we looked at a document talking.
I've had an opportunity to speak to Indigenous people about bear hunting, and that includes the Sami
who have brown bears there.
Yes, who hunted bears and had an entire cultural legacy and amazing stories around these bears, and how they brought the power of the bear into their being through its consumption. As I mentioned, they talked about how when a bear was eaten, that person became so powerful that it was unwise to look upon them. And they described a bone that they had with a hole in it that you had to examine the person through for a time, lest you be burdened and struck by all of this power that they had taken on. And the bear, at the end of its consumption, was reconstructed roughly and buried with all the bones intact. Like there was somebody who doesn't
Wow.
like bears don't take the effort to do
Yeah.
that.
Wow.
And that culture came, as I'm not speaking for them, but I think they came to this understanding of the power of the bear through their hunting and consumption and use of the bear. They had a connection that most contemporary people don't understand.
Yeah, it's like when I talk to a person who I want to be clear, I probably get 97% positive feedback now. Now that's partially because I'm extremely liberal with my block button in social media. So if you come on my social media if you come on saying, hey, this is really hard for me to see.
Oh, that's different though.
Yeah,
That's okay.
I'm like, okay, we're on the right foot there. You're taking ownership of how you're responding.
And I don't want it to be easy.
Right. It should. Why would it be easy? Yeah, exactly. Right. So I like that kind of a person. I get people writing today. I had some people writing. I posted about a bear today, and I noticed both you and I posted a picture of a bare hand.
Yeah,
it's just
it's
a little
not
bit
me
easier.
gloating over
Right,
the animal.
Right.
People telling me I'm trophy hunting, I'm aggrandizing, it's there for my ego. And it's like, if I did that, folks, I would be posted over that bear in some ridiculous pose.
6 feet behind it to make it look twice as big and all that. But, I really like when I have people write me and they go, hey, I'm plant-based and I have been for a while, but I just really respect how you approach this. That's awesome.
I get lots of that.
That's so cool, right?
Yep.
To me, that's the best thing, because if we're really in an echo chamber, we don't hear from those people.
Like, thank you for the tribute that you gave.
Yeah.
Hard to read, but I appreciate it.
And to me, that's amazing when somebody still has an open mind like that's fantastic. However, you get those people who come in, you're sick, and you're like, I'm just like block, I don't.
Yeah, I like.
We're not gonna. This is not. I don't want to fight with you. I'm not here to fight with you. My life is so good. Life is so good. Why would I let you in?
I've started asking them questions now. One person said, "I'm just trying to balance the views," and it's like, balance. You came on. You left all of these pejorative comments about what kind of a person I must be to do this, and essentially demanded that I adopt your worldview or else I'm an evil person. How is that balance? And the conversation just ends because the person goes like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I did.
Right.
So I've started to try to get to the root of what they're doing, and I'll go just a little bit before I do what I've learned from you. At some point, just don't participate. But I like doing one step. Like, they'll say, you're just a trophy hunter. And I'll be like, well, wait just a second. You have no idea the size of this bear that I just shot. It was actually about 100 pounds. That's not a trophy animal. That's a fairly small animal. You waded in with a false accusation, pretended it was the truth, and then attack me for it. So now that you've learned that you misinterpreted the situation, are you willing to start the conversation? Double down. And use ego preservation tactics.
You're also a racist,
I actually used that today, though. I actually used that. Vermont for Wildlife. It's an organization that's trying to end certain kinds of hunting, and especially predator hunting. Bears are omnivores, and to call them a predator, to lump them in with, say, a coyote that eats a much higher proportion of animal foods, demonstrates a fundamental lack of understanding of bear biology, and yet they're here to try to protect them. But they were essentially claiming that no one should hunt these animals. And so I stepped back and said, okay, thank you for your colonial views, because bears have been hunted by indigenous people, which you're saying they shouldn't do. You're disrespecting their culture. You're actually presenting a racist view. How do you respond?
You can't, because you're not indigenous. It's a racial issue.
Yeah. But anyways, it was interesting to see how people come at this. And every once in a while, and I just want to give credit to people that do this, every once in a while on these posts that become controversial, there's somebody who goes, you're right. I did do that, and I'm sorry, and I respect what you're doing, or something like that. And it completely reaffirms my faith in humanity when it happens.
It's amazing how quickly, though, somebody... where you're like, man, did you really even believe the first thing you said, or did you just say stuff that comes to mind? Because sometimes people are real fickle like that. It's a very loosely held belief that they speak as if they're very convicted, but then it's just it's psychology.
They just want to get a response from you.
A strong one. They want to really draw you out, You got to be careful of that.
I did get, a sort of a death threat today that somebody said they're going to hunt me.
Oh, I've gotten some of those. I like those. I'm always like, okay.
All I'm saying is I don't actually want somebody to do this.
I don't either, but
good luck with that.
But I do fantasize about you trying to hunt me. That's what they come. They finally get in the house, and then all the doors lock, the window shutters close, the Hall of Mirror comes out, the smoke machine starts on.
What is it? What was it in the Avengers? Friday, would you initiate barn door protocol? And everything locks down, and they're just inside.
Exactly. Ghost protocol.
It's just it's an incredibly immature way to approach the conversation, that you feel the person is so evil because they participate in a long held tradition of humans doing something, that you want them to die. It's like, thanks for respecting diverse opinions, right? We're all about diversity, equality, inclusivity today, unless it's not what we believe.
It's funny how that blanket term of inclusivity is actually exclusive of a whole bunch of things, and everybody in it knows that.
It's exclusive of things that whites participate in many cases.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to take it down that road, but it's often directed at including more things of people of color and indigenous peoples, which I accept, but it's often at the downplay of people who are not people of color, who still want to participate in being a human being.
Watching you in your life, your life and your career trajectory was sort of on one path, and you saw what colonialism was, and you downshifted and actually changed directions. You could have followed out for your illustrious career. You've written these incredible textbooks. You could have just continued on in a nice, cozy life, and you opted for a far more challenging life in order to embrace the things that those folks did that made them so much more balanced in the world, that makes people go, that's how you should do it, not this way. And you're actually... You have skin in the game, like you're really living that here at Wilder Waters, and then people are criticizing you from their colonialist lifestyle.
Right.
It's so ironic, how it's just all... Anyway, I don't want to go far down this road, but it's just amazing
I
to
understand.
watch that.
I totally understand. And it opens up a lot of discussion here, but for me, Vermont for Wildlife's comments do broach on being racist. And I just want to put that out there, because I've learned that this is an organization that sounds wonderful, but I'm calling them out as something I don't want to support.
Yeah.
And in fact, I'm wondering if other people should be supporting something along those lines, because this is a practice that is old.
Yep.
And I want to emulate those old practices to the best of my ability.
And someone should, and it is a very sustainable thing we're doing. We aren't hunting right whales, because
we're
aren't enough...
hunting bears in a state that in the lower 48 has the most bears of any state. We have so many bears that we even allow through different means... I say we, the biologists, IF&W, in Fisheries and Wildlife, allow 2 to be taken a year if you so choose.
And having some connections at the department, I do know that it gets flirted with the idea of increasing that, because the target goal is 5,000 bears a year, and we're taking about 3,000. And so we are not even harvesting enough bears to maintain the social carrying capacity. And what's interesting about that... Obviously, the landscape can support this bear population, but the people won't tolerate it.
Well, yeah, because you have the people that, like, that goddamn bear tore down my bird feeder. It's a nuisance bear. I want it out of here. Okay, well, then let me function as a predator. Well, no, we can't do it that way.
Yeah.
I just want the bears to not be here. It's a contradiction. First of all, the bears don't want you there, potentially either. But of course, we're going to come at this from a human-centric viewpoint, and I understand that we have to. But it's so interesting that when you have these, quote, nuisance bears, we hear a lot of complaints and people talking about there's too many bears, but we have sometimes the same people who are against the hunting of bears.
Yeah. And I say all that, and you say all that too. I know we both kind of take a bear's life very seriously. I don't mean take its life seriously. We view its life and feel about its life in a very grave manner. Like I don't lightly kill a bear. The more bears that I've killed, the more deeply I feel each bear as an individual with a personality. And actually, because the last 2 years, I've harvested more mature bears. Those ones are impacting me a lot more. I've been back and forth on this. Part of me wants to see I know that every life form fights for its life. Every life form has a internal directive to stay alive, at least through the important phases of its life. And therefore, I know the mosquito wants to live, and I know that the immature bear wants to live, and I know the mature bear wants to live. Everyone wants to live. So I try to see every life, especially because I'm sure there's a relativistic scale thing going on. Like, if you shrunk me down to mosquito size, mosquitoes might mean more to me.
I understand.
Because of my scale in relationship to them, they seem less valuable to me. And because the bear is bigger than me, he seems to have more value. But then, does a blue whale have more value than a bear? How many bears is worth a blue whale? Like, I don't like hierarchical thinking about life. I think that's because that's how we got into, is a white life worth more than a black life? Like, this sick kind of mentality.
Hey, we'll get right back to the show in a moment, but first, if you're looking for lightweight, minimalist footwear that keeps you intimately connected to your landscape, check out Earth Runners. Earth Runners are a minimalist, electrically grounded Huarache sandal made with Vibram soles, conductive laces, and an electrically conductive copper plug in the sole that allows a free flow of electrons from the earth into your body. Think about it, the rubber soles of most shoes insulate you electrically from the earth. This really contrasts with the rest of the animal kingdom, most of whom live in a perpetual state of electrical groundedness. It's just humans that have disconnected our natural circuitry from the planet we live on. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors, even when they manufactured footwear like leather moccasins or woven fiber sandals, were still electrically grounded through the moisture that wicked through those materials. But with our modern footwear, we are cut off. Earth Runners have solved that problem while still delivering a sturdy, modern adventure sandal. Whether on land or on and in the water, Earth Runners are ready to meet whatever adventure you are. Their sleek, minimalist design and rugged materials ensure that they'll last too. So head over to earthrunners.com and use the coupon code WildFed. It'll get you 10% off your order. Again, that's earthrunners.com. Now, back to the show.
It's a ladder of some sort, or a spreadsheet of values.
Or a pyramid.
A pyramid. And it's so funny, a friend of mine who's a Penobscot Passamaquoddy lady will come to talk about climate change, and she'll give these really nice talks, and it's arranged in a circle, the topics. And I'm like, oh, right.
Why didn't I think of that?
My mind is, there's the tabular grid of topics,
right.
And she's got this circle. And it just goes to, please understand that if you're creating hierarchical thinking, you have baggage from this industrial society based on religions that you may not practice, but your parents, your grandparents, or somebody before you did, that created a hierarchy of life. Instead of recognizing that we are pieces of this complex web, you're seeing yourself at the top, and the bear's pretty near the top, and the mosquito's way down low, and it's 100% artificial. Because if you are, say, the little brown myotis, a bat that feeds on some of these tiny insects, the bear's not what's most important to you.
Right.
It's the mosquito.
Right.
So it's all relative, and stop pretending to be so righteous about it.
Yeah, or to even know, because if you haven't participated, you don't know.
Yeah.
So last year, you remember, I killed an extremely mature bear.
Yes.
In a rare bear. I want to preface by saying, I'm the guy on the tuna boat who reeled in the tuna. The captain put us on the boat. The captain put us on the fish. The mates are all making it happen.
Oh, right.
I'm just the guy on the reel. So I happened to shoot that bear, and so it's my bear. But I want to make it clear, I'm not trying to pretend that I am this incredible bear.
I masterminded the entire...
Definitely, I absolutely did not. But that bear, I spent the rest of the year feeling like maybe not worthy of harvesting that bear, but also feeling so grateful that I did. And wrestling with this. Then this year, harvested another really mature bear.
Nearly as large, right?
Well, it's interesting when you look at their two skulls next to each other. You're like, wow, that other bear was really, really big.
But they were close weight-wise.
No, not really.
Okay.
I think the other bear was a full 200 pounds bigger.
Oh, I thought I'd heard you say that they were closer.
The the condyles on the skull, the length of the skull, the
Understood.
width,
Okay.
structures that are on the skull that only
Yes.
come with age, as
Yes, yes.
more and more tension on the bone creates those chunky condyles.
So
like
you
that.
could see the
you
difference.
can see it.
Wow.
So I would say that this was a big mature bear, a
Mm-hmm.
good bear. Like anybody be like, that's a great bear. But the bear from last year he was huge. Now I'm starting to really wonder, like, it's just a weird thing when you start. Okay, so I feel weird when the animal's older. I want to come back to the bears in a second, but I want to say, you remember Grant down in Georgia, and I caught that redfish.
Mhm.
Again, the captain put us on it,
Yeah.
blah 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 blah. But I reeled in a red snapper that was the size and weight of, like, if you took like a manhole cover and you were like, how do I even hold this fish?
Yeah.
Enormous. And everybody on the boat's going, oh my God, I've never seen one that big. And they fish these fish, I just happened to be on the reel when it happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there holding this fish like, this fish has never felt his weight before.
Yeah.
This fish does not know what gravity unbuoyed is like.
Right.
He's feeling his organs slump in his stomach. He's probably can't see properly. He's just being, all this stuff's going on. And I'm like, this old man, or old woman, like, I want to put her back, but you're in all that moment. Anyway, it's like, I start thinking about when we harvested that alligator. He was 10 foot 8 inches long, and the guy we were with said, wow, he's probably 40. And I was 40 at the time. And I'm like, my goodness, imagine.
This is like fishing for lake whitefish.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
It's like, I don't know, but maybe we were born the same year.
Yes.
Maybe we've been on these dual trajectories this whole time. It's like, I don't think about that when I slap a mosquito, and I don't think about that if I catch a little, yellow perch or something.
I understand.
But when I'm with an older animal, that stuff starts coming up for me. So I start thinking about these bears. Is this bear that I just killed the son of the bear I killed last year? Have they fought each other? Have they sired many of the bears we've harvested in that region? You know the region. We've hunted it a lot. We took 10 bears there last year. So it's like, what role did they play in these social groups and all of this stuff? Age makes me think about that. And I think as I'm getting older, I turn 42 tomorrow. It's like I now appreciate age in a way. When you're younger, you're just like, whatever, old man. You don't understand.
You're so ignorant.
You don't understand wisdom. The
Yeah.
accumulation of wisdom that comes
Right.
from loss and pain and experiences and highs and lows and seeing cycles and understanding context that you've missed as a young person. So then I start to see that in those animals, and that impacts me. And it does not make me regret hunting them, but it gives me more reverence. And I've always, every bear that I've killed has had a lot of meaning to me, but these last 2 years have changed me as a person. I'll be sitting in a room and I'm looking at everybody, everybody's talking, and I have this thing going on inside, and nobody can talk to you about it. And I imagine sometimes what a vet feels when they've returned from combat and maybe they've killed a person, and in a war context. I mean, but how it must be hard when you're sitting around with a bunch of people and you're the only one who has that. I don't know what that's like, but I know what it's like when you've killed a 600-pound bear and you're trying to, like, just have a conversation with everybody, and you feel weird inside and nobody knows how to process it with you, and you don't want to bring it up because even the idea of hunting bears alone is enough to set everybody.
It's triggering, right? For
Right.
some people, right? Yeah. I think about those things a lot because I don't know exactly what it is, but I came from a rural culture where the kinds of things that we're talking about the individual animals that we have shot and killed through various means, I don't think that the people haven't thought them, but it's almost like they're lacking an emotional language to present it, or it's taboo is too strong a word, but it's not culturally appropriate to talk about the individual animal in these deeply emotional ways.
Right.
And I'd like to see that change.
Me too. I think we're in our small way, we're affecting some of that change.
Hopefully.
And in a way way more powerful than us is that change, I think, is underway because I'll write something about that, and the response I get isn't like, hey, I've never thought that. Thanks for putting that in my head. It's a lot of people being like, that's how I feel. I'm glad you're saying it. So I think, like, we're part of a wave of...
One of the biggest, and this is a very practical reason. Well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons I want people to start using their emotion centers a lot more in hunting. I want them to truly have gratitude for that animal, because I think it'll end up meaning that there's greater utilization of animals when possible. You're not just going to, well, I'm not going to take the time to do that. You're like, no, this animal gave its life. I've taken its life. I need to honor this animal. But I especially want to see it come with, this animal is presenting a poor shot where vitals are not presented. And instead of just being like, fuck it, blast it, that kind of thought process, the animal means so much that we're like, this isn't respectful to take this shot. I'm going to pass this animal because I'm afraid I'm going to do a wounding shot. Now, I understand that when other predators wound animals, they don't go home and sulk about it. It's like that happens. But I can consciously think about what the outcome of that shot that is not into the vitals is going to be, and how in all probability it's going to result in a lost, wounded animal that dies of an infection or something like this. It puts me...
Or predation while
it's alive, right? So the point I'm trying to make is it requires me to act in a more ethical way because I have an ability to predict outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because if you continue to do those kind of things, because there's that saying, I know nothing's literally 100% true all the time, but I have this thing that I sort of live by: the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And so that's why Grant, of my annoying tendencies of, no, we always charge the batteries when we get back from a shoot. That's why we put numbers on every single thing that we use in production, right? It's because that organization carries through in everything. And so I can't imagine I'll be sloppy with that, but I'm not going to be sloppy with this. Guarantee the thing that there'll be entropy on the thing you're trying to be organized on, right? That's just how I've seen it. So if you get in the habit of those kind of behaviors, wounding shots, Lawrence calls it shooting into a bear. You don't just shoot into a bear, Dan. You shoot to kill. You don't ever shoot into a bear. So it's like if you do that...
Bluntly put, but completely true.
Accurate. So if you do that kind of thing, that's like kind of carrying on into your life, and you could see how it could engender a kind of irreverence that could be destructive in lots of categories of your life. If you start to treat people that way, you start to treat your things that way, you start to, so it's like having that level of respect and then precision, I think, carries through a lot, because, man, the number of times, I'm sure you can think of it on 100 things where you do something, you're like, I'm kind of doing this wrong, and then you kind of follow through with the wrong, and then it's just like,
it falls
so
apart.
Painful when you
it
do
just
that.
Doesn't work out.
So, yeah, I agree. I think that I can't imagine just shooting into animals. The idea that we have to wear hunter orange surprises me. Only because I think if it was more people like you and me, we wouldn't need to.
Well,
I would never shoot.
Let's be honest. Hunter orange is the lowest common denominator.
Right. Because there are people that shoot into sounds.
Yes. And I remember this growing up. I had a sound shot today.
That was a thing.
That was real.
You also have a friend who was shot by a hunter, correct?
My ex-partner's father was
Took
shot.
a slug in the bicep.
He came down out of a tree stand. He was wearing like brown overalls, or as I recall. And when he came down, he had a backpack or something that he was getting hunter orange on to walk out of the forest. And he was shot in the arm with a 12-gauge slug.
Well, luckily, the person couldn't aim well. But it's just...
No, there's nothing about a human's movements that look or sound like the movements of a bear, a deer, or moose.
No, I don't get this. I can see if I'm carrying a deer on my back, right, and I'm walking through the woods, and somehow someone sees that deer.
But even then, it's not moving.
Right. But
like
you're just walking through, and you're like, something's alive over there. It must be what I want it to be.
I like to joke about, I'm curious to know when the first person in history truly accidentally shot a human thinking it was, say, a white-tailed deer.
I was thinking the 1920s or something.
Yeah, like it definitely was not any First Nations person.
Not into antiquity, that's for sure.
Because they knew their animals, because they had hunted them, they had been clothed by them, they had, again, deep connections, and they knew them.
Yeah. But you get to know them through observing them and often through hunting them. And what's hard is when you're criticized by people who've never observed these animals. And I don't mean Yellowstone. I understand, because that's like going to the movies.
Yeah, right.
You're not you're not seeing them in truly natural behavior. You're seeing them in human acclimated behaviors. But when you're in the I'll use this as an example. So I shot my 8th bear this year, but I've only ever passed on one bear. And it was this year, and it was the first one. And that's the only animal that I have passed on. So it's interesting, as I grow as a hunter, it's like every animal that was legal and I had a tag for and I had a shot at, I just took the shot every time. And if it was a big one, I got a big one. If it was a small one, I got a small one.
I did the same thing. I have only ever passed one animal in my life. A larger mammalian, I'm talking like you. And that was a young of the year white-tailed deer who I had seen with its mother a week ago, that was killed in the mother, the doe, was killed in the expanded archery zone. And I'm like, I don't need your whole lineage to be gone from existence.
Something comes in through you. Huh?
It's the first animal I've ever passed on.
When was that?
Last year, in fact. My philosophy is that it's closer to what I think wild predators would be. I'm not a trophy hunter. I take the first one offered. If do you actually think that the wolves were like,
a little lean?
I'm not gonna take that one, right? There is this animal, through some reason, lack of awareness, injury, age, sickness, through some reason has offered itself to the wolves, and if the wolves are hungry, they're going to prey upon that animal. Yeah. And I do the same thing. I am not interested in removing the best genetics from the forest, but if offered, which for me, that's never been offered. All of my deer have been 170 pounds, or, I haven't shot.
Average deer.
Yeah, just normal sized deer. But if it's offered, I'll take it. But I'm not going to pretend that is my goal. My goal is to put meat on the table, meat that my family will eat as well. Right. So that also plays into this. And these animals that we've been able to harvest from the forest have been exactly what my family needed.
Yep, I get it. And it's like there are a lot of, especially right now, there's a huge resurgence of trophy hunters who eat the meat, and there are meat hunters who sometimes get a trophy, and that's all gets blurry, and there's a lot of gray. Yeah. But I do want to say, so Grant, you remember, was it last winter, the winter before, you and I were hunting together, but you did not have a doe tag for our region, and we spent like an hour and a half watching that doe and her fawn in the snow.
Yeah.
And I learned so much just watching her. That's one of my favorite memories of that.
When I get to watch these secretive animals or incredibly aware animals, that includes like wild turkeys, when they don't know I'm there and I get to watch them for an extended period.
Especially when they respond to other things and it's not you.
Oh, again, like you're saying, they're some of my most memorable experiences ever. I mean, I have been within touching distance of a cow, moose, and her calf, and they didn't know we were there.
That's cool.
And that was at night, hiding on their trail. And that memory is burned.
Yeah.
They're going to be the last to go.
Yeah. Yeah, this year, the hunt right before the bear I harvested, I was in a tree stand, and this bear came in. There was the voices up by the road, 250 yards away or something. People were talking, and because there was a friend had sent me down behind his house quite a ways, but I could hear people talking, like somebody had come home from work in a truck. They're having a conversation with his family in the yard.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, well, this is going to blow the whole hunt. And then this animal
I've had a sit blown by somebody walking their dog.
Okay,
before.
They didn't come in though.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was interesting when the bear came in, because I for whatever reason I decided I'm not going to shoot this bear. He was maybe 2 years old. And so I'm just watching him, and I thought a lot about it. I came real close, I thought a lot about it. An owl landed in front of me, and a barred owl landed in front of me and started to call like 15 feet from me. And I was like, am I supposed to shoot this bear? Like, are you telling me to shoot this bear, or am I going to just
looking
wait?
at you, right?
Looking right in my eyes. You know those black barred owl eyes where it's like looking right at me and the bear's right there.
I'm always like, look, please forgive me. I come from a culture of nature divorced orphans. I don't know how to interpret this.
Exactly.
Can you point?
Exactly.
Tell me to leave.
like Elon, can you work on an owl link? That's what I need in my brain. So I'm watching the bear though, and I'm seeing it was such a great opportunity to see that he didn't care about those voices. They were very loud. He knew where they were. He's like he understood. Then watching him respond to squirrels, watching him respond, not interested in the owl. Like, what's he interested in? What's he not interested in?
And by the way,
really
the
valuable.
squirrels running around are so much louder than the bears.
It's unreal. When the bear comes in, you hear nothing. Nothing.
The bear that I recently shot, I had someone accompanying me, and I had told him, we'll barely know it's coming in. Barely. And I'm so terrible with I didn't even know I was doing a pun. It was so stupid. And it's just funny. My brain doesn't work like that at all. And the gray squirrels are like a ruckus.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's an army coming.
Oh, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, after a long wait and in the last minutes of legal hunting, there's...
Yeah. Walking in his old footsteps.
And it takes...
Tell the story. Tell the story.
Minutes. From starting... Well... I was born in Avon.
Which we visited recently, by the way, and it's such an amazing area. You know,
the Sandy River is the best.
That whole area, it's really cool that there's a group here now working on conserving it. And,
yes.
And it's,
is it the High Peaks Alliance?
High Peaks Alliance, yeah. And it's just, they brought us up there to be like, hey, we want to have this conversation with you at the top of the mountain so you understand what we're trying to conserve. And we got up there and it's a place that for most people out west, they'd be like, oh, this has got to be public land. It's like, well, it's all private land.
You're in Maine, dude. It's all
we
private.
We don't have public land.
And, it's really, really hard. But I've been placing bait. I'm using a trail mix. It's mostly nuts and dried fruits. Just a little bit of some sweet in there. If that's not there, I found it's not coming in. I used to be very idealistic about bear bait, and I found a roadkill deer, and I brought it out. There were bears visiting the site and they didn't touch it.
Yeah.
The maggots consumed it, right? The fly maggots.
They're like, bro, there's a bait like over here, and there's another bait down there, and I'll just go eat that. Why are you giving me this rotten deer?
Yeah, so
they're visiting all kinds of bait sites.
So I'm looking for something that is as close to what I can get to what they eat. Because remember, what I'm feeding them becomes their tissues, and then I eat them, and their nutrition becomes my tissues. I don't want to give them pastries and donuts and all this stuff because I just become that, like they become that. So feeding trail mix, and I'll bring out some molasses. It's molasses we'd use in our home if we didn't have maple syrup is our prime source of sweetener.
You're out there giving them maple syrup and wild rice.
Yeah, but and I put a little of that on the food, but mostly I'm putting it on the bark of a tree to help that scent carry. Yeah. And this year it took 25 days because we have a 30-day pre-bait period before we can legally start hunting. Approximately, maybe it's 31 days, but it's about a month. And took 25 days for the bears to come in. I just assumed they weren't even coming in. Last year, it did take a while. I think it was 15 days, but then there were 3 bears that had visited, which we never hunted. Just got to learn about the bears coming to and living on this property. So this bear doesn't come in for a long time, and it's always after dark. Or maybe it shows up with like a minute before legal hunting hours close, like once. But it's always after dark. It visits sometimes a couple of times. And then it's not even regular anymore. It's coming in every other day, sometimes every third day. And you
don't have a sense of how many other people in this,
I know,
say 20 square miles are baiting?
No, not at that level. I do know there's another person in the town that I live that is baiting bears, and I also know that person had mentioned that there wasn't much coming in this year.
Okay.
And that's it. I know that there's if we could have a satellite view of the bear baits, and just to sort of understand how they move around on the landscape.
Someday that may be
what
something
they
that
visit.
exists, because people might have to report coordinates
Yes.
at some point. So,
Right,
but right
right.
now, we don't have that resolution.
So I continue baiting, but I'm baiting with the hopes that another bear will show up, because this one is being very smart, being very aware, and being very sensitive to the fact that there's human scent. They know we're there. We have to walk in to place the bait. And there's essentially, I put most of the bait inside of a barrel, and I tip the barrel a little bit so rainwater would come out, and most of it's protected from rain, so it doesn't just become soggy after precipitation. And often they grab the barrel and they move it to where they want it to be.
Yeah, where they feel most
because
comfortable.
they can't move the trail mix because it's in pieces, right? And but the bear that had been coming in essentially never moved it. And I should say, it's really interesting to see the hierarchy of life that comes in, particularly at night. This year, there were lots of small rodents and mice, deer mice coming in, and flying squirrels. And, of course, they move out of the way of the raccoons, which eat most of the bait. The raccoons don't leave, but they give way for the porcupine, who occasionally comes
sounds
in.
like a bulldozer coming through the
Yeah,
forest.
and so they just sit back. They're still there, and then everybody leaves when the bear comes, and they don't return for 30 minutes, an hour or so. They give that bear a lot of room, but it's just funny. And we often have a fisher visits,
that's cool.
but the fisher leaves at the incoming of the raccoons, because the raccoons are often coming in a troop.
Right, and they'll harass them.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to sort of visualize all that happening. So we're going along, and I'm assuming there's not going to be any bear taken this year, and that's okay. To me, living and on the plate, to put that really terribly, they're both important.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
So,
I get you.
So I help that bear, and that's the end of it. And next year, maybe. I don't mind that. But all of a sudden, there's a bear that comes into the bait at 5:30 p.m. Legal hunting ends at 7:15 of the next day.
And you're on the ground in a blind?
Yes. Yeah. And I wasn't using a tree stand. I was 25 yards out in a blind. And I used the blind because of the way the wind typically goes, the topography there, and the direction the bears had always come in. I would alert them. The blind was specifically used to help contain my scent. So I have a person who's here, who's participating in a kind of a skills program that revolves a lot around modern hunting and gathering.
By the way, I want to make sure at the end we talk about the programs that you offer here.
Oh, sure.
So that people know, we'll get back to that.
And through a process of wondering if this is something he wants to participate in, we settle on he wants to be with me that night.
But you're the shooter.
But I'm the shooter. And partly because of the price of out-of-state permits, partly because of the likely how dark it may be, and so on and so forth. So we immediately go through odor elimination protocols, right? He has washed clothes in a bag that he also washed in unscented soaps, and he's had that stored. Immediately, all clothing comes out, inside out, in the sun, so that the sun can kill odor-causing bacteria.
Yeah, and just oxidize.
Yeah, we're going nuts. I have to. I'm not prepared with some dark clothes because most of the animals I hunt in a blind can't smell. Wild turkeys, or don't smell well enough to detect us. And so we go through this whole thing, and it's my biggest fear. You're not going to hear us because we'll sit still. You're not going to see us because I'm in a blind, and bears don't have amazing eyesight. But I'm worried about their sense of smell. And so we go through this.
And the blind's been there all along?
Yes.
So
well, no. After bears started coming, I decided, you know what, I'll set one up now. But it had been there for 2 weeks at least. Okay. And I brushed it in a little to break up its outline. So it was clear they weren't afraid of the blind. And also, the opening is mesh with a little turret hole, so it's even further encasing us and our scent within this. And we were successful. We thwarted that bear smelling us. And it comes in, and we've literally got minutes left of legal time. And it's like, you've got to get here. It's very dark. We're north aspect.
End of legal light under the canopy and end of legal light in a field are two different animals.
We're
completely.
end of legal light under a canopy on a mild north slope.
Yeah, it's dark.
It's dark. And I keep
Pretty close to the new moon, too.
Yeah, I keep hearing the bear, and I'm using the optic to collect light for me. I can't see it. I can't see it. I can hear it. I can't see it.
How many power is the optic? 3?
I was using around 4. It dials, but I don't have it cranked way up. And I'm using it around 4 power. And finally, I believe I can see a shadow. And looking through the optic, I can see the bear is there, just inspecting the bait. And all I can see is a perfect silhouette. There's no texture. I can't see where the shoulder rounds out. It's way too dark.
Coal black. Their hides are so black that
you,
as soon as there's no light, you can't see any features.
It's just crazy. But fortunately, I had that silhouette. And so I take a shot, and that shot ends up going through the heart. And the bear travels about 8 yards. So it's a rapid death, and lets out the calls that sometimes come with bear deaths. And that's the part that I had written about in mine, is that, yes, this animal agonizes in its last moments. It makes vocalizations that are emotional and are haunting. But I'm going to do the same thing on my death. And that is not the fact that there is suffering at the end of life, even if brief. That's not reason for us not to participate in an activity, because lives suffer as they end. You know, I feel like our culture has this desperate wish that they'll die in their sleep.
Yeah.
No pain, and they're not even consciously aware that they're dying. We're going for the painless death that I will say carries absolutely no meaning. Right? It carries... You're seeking the most meaningless death possible. I mean, I don't actually want some crazy confrontation, but if...
Addle, dart.
Yeah, but if my death came from going into a burning building and saving a child, or standing up for an oppressed person, or rescue, you see where I'm going. A hero's death, that's a death that has meaning. No one idolizes and talks for decades about the person who died in their sleep.
Tonight we're going to tell the story of the old man who died in his sleep. It's like,
but people do have reverence for the people that put themselves at risk to stand up for something.
Yeah.
And so we recognize then that sometimes humans, when they suffer at the end of their life, it has meaning. And so that's a normal part of a good death. And this bear and I were essentially... We were in a struggle that lasted a month and a half, a little bit more, of trying to figure out how I could intersect that bear in a legal way to have that wild food and have that experience for my family, for the community here. And of course, it always ends up getting shared. And so often Grant and you were having wild food meals that we're talking about. And this time, I succeeded, but I don't lots of the time.
Right.
And to end really these amazing, these lives that are adapted to their landscape, they're strong lives, they're powerful lives, they're spiritually powerful lives. To end their lives, we have to overcome all of this adaptation and all of this strength. And I'm sorry, but to do that means that there will be suffering, perhaps briefly, but it has to come. And it's normal. And I don't want it to end.
Right.
I don't like hurting anything. I'm not saying I wish pain on anything. I only recognize it's biologically normal and we shouldn't be trying to transcend it.
Yeah. It's interesting to imagine that bear and you having this dance for all that time, because no doubt, your bait site's not far from your home. So
No.
he smells the human beings that are here, your fire.
All the time.
food. He smells your trail, how you come in to put the food in that bait bucket. He knows when you come. He knows when you leave. He's avoiding you, but trying to sneak through enough to get the food without being caught by you. And you're trying to, catch him off guard. And there's this interesting dance that you guys were in for 6 weeks.
Yeah. To talk about the hierarchy of life, I get a lot of comments that bear baiting is unsportsmanlike. It's inhumane. It's
You should be making more sport of their life.
Yeah.
I hate that
That's
argument.
more humane and moral, as if you make them into a sport.
And those same people say nothing about putting an earthworm on a hook to bait in brook trout.
Mm-hmm.
They've erected a hierarchy of life.
Yeah.
Indigenous people have used carrion to hunt over.
Mm-hmm.
Are you claiming that there's something wrong with those people? Because be careful, right? If you're going to say that they were wrong, you're presenting again a colonial view of what you believe indigenous people should do.
Yeah.
And it's just you start treading into these weird waters.
Yeah.
And I'm only trying to say that yes, I legally bait animals that we need to bait. I'd never see bear if I didn't bait them. I don't believe that Maine should bait white-tailed deer because I don't believe we need to.
We don't need to. That's it.
We can learn their habits through tracking and encounter them. We can intersect with them. I would never see a black bear.
No.
When I
rarely.
say never,
well, you see
get
him on the road.
Yeah.
You'll see him crossing the street.
Yeah,
out of season
I've
and
seen
stuff, but-
I've seen outside of bear hunting about approximately 18 bears in my life, and four of those were at one
professionally in the woods.
Yeah, 4 of those were at one time a sow with
Right,
3 cubs.
right.
You know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, yeah.
It's very hard to encounter them, and I appreciate how hard it is to encounter them. And for people that think baiting them is an automatic win, it isn't, because many of the bears are
Most
nocturnal
of the
and
people never see them.
yeah. So I just to present that we're trying to figure out how to feed our family from the forest. And while you judge me, you're eating chemically sprayed produce from forests and prairies that are now long gone. You're eating cage-reared animals and acting righteous. Just stop and recognize we all create some type of change to the landscape to feed ourselves. For me, what I like doing the most is keeping the forest standing to get as much of my food as possible. And I understand that not everyone can do that.
Yeah, you should denude this and plant some crops here.
I know that I should, but I don't. But I'm going to resist.
Yeah.
And I do understand that I am amazingly lucky that I get to participate in this. But it doesn't make me an evil person. Come and walk in my shoes
Well,
before
you're not
you
even
throw.
wearing shoes, right?
Yeah.
come and walk in my tracks.
But it's like I am willing to have that conversation with anybody, so long as they don't start with accusations.
Right. I got a lot to say in response to that. I want to
Good.
go back to what you said about the bait thing. It's so interesting how with some animals, that's just the expectation you'll bait them.
Well, people will put peanut butter on a trap to bait a mouse and kill it,
Right.
and that was okay.
Right.
Because, well, that was a nuisance animal, you see.
Right. And then, and then I've been thinking about this with fish, because I was thinking, okay, like most of the fishing I'll do with live or cut bait.
Yes.
But then I understand that there's all of the fly fishing folks and let's start with the lure fishing folks, and then there's the fly fishing folks. So the lure fishing folks would be like, you shouldn't use food to bait a bear. And it's like, okay, can I put a very photorealistic fawn on a string and drag it around the woods until a bear chases it? Like, does that count? Because that's what you're
a lure,
doing.
right?
Or is it like, what if I use a really flimsy string and a very lightweight decoy? Now I'm like the fly fisher. Like, where do you? How come with this animal and not this animal? Now, you're right. I also want to go back to, because I think we've seen with the numbers here in the States, something like, was it 1% to 3% of bears are taken during the general
I think it was
season
3%,
without the use
yeah.
of bait or traps or dogs.
Yeah, and I think it's important to mention, if I'm remembering the number correctly, only 15% of bait hunters are successful harvesting a bear. It's low. It's not a guarantee. So
Right.
when you have this idea that we're putting out apple pies and the bears just come in and we blast them and then we put them in this pose of their roaring and like that Larson cartoon, the bear comes in and it's just placidly sipping this water in a pool. The hunter shoots it and then stuffs it in this crazy. That's not what's happening.
Man,
I
so
have
much there.
sorrow for this bear, but I also need to live.
It's so good. All of this stuff is so interesting because if you remember, quick for the audience listening, last year when I harvested that very large bear, gutted weight, legs cut out, hours of drying and dragging, and he weighed 486. He was the largest bear killed in New Hampshire last year. He was probably in the 6 to 650 kind of zone when he was live. And we had harvested our team 14 bears last year, a lot of hunters. You had your first clients last year as a guide. We were running and gunning the whole time. I was very busy and I cut a lot of bears and I helped a lot of bears get cut. So when I finally got this bear that big, man, I took that hide, because I don't do taxidermies, took that hide into my backyard and I fed it to the coyotes. And everybody got really upset with me. Why don't you want one of these giant? Because he would have made an awesome full-size standing up scary mount. It's like, well, I shot him out of a tree, dude. He wasn't doing any of that. He was running from the dogs.
Yes.
But I was really moved when my taxidermist told me that hey, that bear should have ended up in a museum. Next time, think that through, because that was a unique specimen that would have meant something in a biological context. For a museum or a university or something. So this year I was really conflicted. This bear was also very nice. The hide was very nice. And I'm talking so I bring it to my guy Pete, and I say, Pete, like, do I have to make a decision right now? I don't think I want to do a taxidermy, but we did cape him out, so the hide was really nice. Mm-hmm. I was like, I'm probably just going to tan it. Can I just leave it with you and think about it? And he's like, yeah. And I said, I don't want to do anything that's disingenuous. I don't want a bear coming out of the wall with claws and teeth. I don't want him standing up and roaring. That wasn't my experience. Do you have like a bear sitting down looking fat on his ass the way they do when they're like rolling around and scratching their back or something? He's like, oh, yeah, they have. So he showed me all the mounts. I was like, now that's cool, Anyway.
Just don't put the Christmas hat on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not going down that road.
A cigarette in its mouth.
I'm like, where are you going to put this thing? And, like every square inch of my home is like used, so I can't picture it. So
I've never caught a fish worth even showing in terms of that trophy size fish. And it was
some of those salmon you caught recently.
Well, that was it, right? And the friend I was with, who is a fishing guide, said, this rainbow trout, it's 11 pounds. You got to get it mounted. And I'm like, okay. So I took some measurements, but we've done nothing. I said, what do you think, Sarah? She's like, no, we're not paying for anything like that. Just like anything that even goes near being interpreted as ego.
Yeah.
It's just like, no, we can't do it. We can't do it. And so I appreciate her hard line, but at the same time,
some of those wood carvings are nice though.
At the same time, it was one of my favorite days of the summer, and memorializing it also is really special to me. But I hear what you're saying.
And that's why I keep the skulls. And
yes.
But as you see, Grant, it's like I got a button buck skull. Nobody's slapping me on the back for that. They're like, "Why'd you shoot that?" And then I have some nice skulls too, from that perspective.
Is that the buck that literally like one meal almost the entire crew?
Yeah, we ate. You were there. We almost ate the whole thing. We ate 2 hindquarters in a sitting. But I also want to say, so most people don't get the opportunity to kill a bear in the Northeast without using trap, bait, or dogs.
Right.
But the other day, Grant, with a bear tag in his pocket, is on a dirt road, and a bear walks out, pulls over, the bear just hangs out in the road.
Yeah.
Dirt road, you can shoot on a dirt road in Maine, right?
Yes, but you just have
10
to
feet.
You have to get out of your vehicle to load the weapon.
Right. So on a dirt road you can, and on a paved road 10 feet off. So I'm looking at the photo, I'm like, Grant, you could have just stepped out of your car and shot this bear. He's like, yeah, I thought about bringing a gun, but I didn't have it. I was like, oh my gosh, you had the opportunity that very few people
He
get.
just slowly walked into a posted area and looked at me.
He's like, how about now?
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy because I have had that, not in Maine. In Massachusetts, in western Massachusetts, there was a bear that displayed that same behavior, stayed in the road. We were back probably 60, 70 yards, reasonably close, out of a vehicle, watching this animal. But I've seen that behavior one time in my
not
life.
Common. And then
and Grant may never see it again.
Oh, he won't. I mean, not during the season with a tag in your pocket. It's very unlikely.
Right.
Now, I also want to bring up that my friend Linda, she hunted in the North Maine woods over baits for, I think, 5, maybe even up to 8 years in a row. Never even saw a bear.
Really?
Then Lawrence...
You remember one of the clients last year would hear the bears come in after dark and knock everything over, but they
couldn't get them in shooting light.
Couldn't get them in shooting light.
So Lawrence starts positioning Linda the last 2 years on a little stretch of unposted land near a cornfield where he knows the bears travel back and forth.
Yes.
In the last 2 years, she shot bears there. No bait, no dogs, no trap. But there's a cornfield there, right? So, in other words, how many of these bears that we see shot in the general season that represent that 1 to 3%? I mean, to me, if you shot a bear over a cornfield, you might as well.
It is a legal form of bait that is not called bait.
Correct.
Because it's agricultural standing crop or refuse.
Right.
Because there's a farmer nearby that discards grains, and there's all these waterfowl that come in.
Right.
And I don't hunt over them because it's in. But the point is he would let me, and I could shoot them there, and it's legal because it's spillage.
It's spill odor, yeah.
Yeah, it's legal.
So my point being that this kind of skews the impression, because I want to imagine that those 1 to 3% of bears are some guy intentionally stalking a bear through the woods in some way, or intentionally sitting over where they know they'll be. But in reality, it's stuff like that, or it's guys deer hunting from tree stands, and a bear happens by, and the general season runs during that.
I have spent so much time in trees. I want that experience. Even if I'm not planning to shoot, I want to see the bear walk
Just come
through.
on by, right? It's
I've
not
never
that
had
likely.
that.
It's pretty rare. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to say on that topic. But I do want to tell the story of my bear, too, because, like I mentioned, I passed on that first bear, and I went to sit at another spot where we have a very established bait. You've been to that bait quite a bit.
Is it mountain bait?
Mountain bait.
By the way, in sort of this honor to Lawrence, we started naming our baits here.
Yeah.
So we have cliff bait.
Great.
And brook bait.
Yeah.
And next year I'm actually maybe try some others, but we've started naming those one-word names.
Yeah, nice, like single syllable.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so mountain bait is way better than the bog bait, in my opinion. But I've actually been a little nervous to sit the mountain bait because of the number of bears that come through there. And anyway, I went and sat it one day. It was raining, and I ended up sitting on the ground. Nothing happened that day. So I went back the third day.
Are you in a blind when you were on the ground?
No, I was just on the ground, tucked up.
Gotcha.
And I knew, and it's interesting to talk to Lawrence about scent, because he's from that generation of, you're logging all day or working all day on construction or something, and then you just go out and shoot a deer, and it's like they don't really do the scent control thing much, and they were very effective hunters. But he also understands scent because of his dogs.
Yes.
So he knows things about scent that, people buying scent lock clothes don't understand. And one of those was, he's like, Dan, it's raining. Your scent's not going anywhere. It's not traveling. Don't worry. You walk right up to you. Anyway, I sat that night, though, and nothing happened. It was raining too hard, and the bears were probably laid up. But I come back the next day, I just knew it. I already knew that it was, I just knew it. I'd heard that owl. I felt like that owl, I was like, I'm going to be successful, So I go, I sit, owl comes in.
Oh, again?
Calls, yeah. And I was like, okay, it's on. Because that's what happened my very first bear, an owl came. And I was like, okay, this is all, I kind of know this routine, Sitting there, and I sit for a few hours. I had a real good tree stand. I really took my time. I've been learning from mistakes, too exposed, too closed, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, you need your shooting lane, but you have to also have your silhouette kind of covered up.
And sometimes I think it's better to lean on less shooting lanes and be better hidden.
I agree.
So I had a very narrow lane. but it was lined up over where I knew he would have to go.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I sat and sat and sat, and eventually about 60 yards away, I never hear, I just see a bear go by, but
I know, but you never see. See, I've been in the blind, and it's the worst because you've got this little tiny window.
you're looking at
view,
a little prison window.
And I want to be. There's one place I have that the wind direction is predictably away from where they come into the bay, and I want to sit there so badly so I can just watch the process unfold.
Ghillie suit would be cool.
Yeah.
So I watch him go by, and he's obviously coming to the bait, but he doesn't come right in. I'm like, where is he? Because I'm used to seeing small bears walk straight to the bait.
Right.
But obviously they get shot, right? Then that trait,
disappears.
They don't get to develop the ability to learn, So you could imagine if a bear's been shot at and missed, he knows now, and he plays the game better. So this bear goes out real wide, and I can't hear him, so it's like, I know he's there. I know he's come here for this bait. He's not just walking by and going to pass it up. He looked big to me, but I didn't know. But you know that feeling when your heart rate it's like I'm doing all the breathing techniques and stuff, but your heart rate just goes to, it's a drumbeat in your ears.
But not to mention this time of year where we're getting frost, toward the end of the sit, I'm cold.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to get cold. Then the animal comes, and you cannot control it because you were about to start shivering, but now you're it's happening.
So awesome. I love that part of it. I love that part. But anyway, he comes out wide, and I realize eventually I see some rustling. I still don't really hear him. I just see him moving stuff as he comes through. He's doing a big, wide circle. He wants to catch the wind to make sure there's nothing there, no one's there. So I just kind of watch, but the light is just fading so fast. And I'm getting toward the last light. And it's like, is he going to come out before the last light? And eventually, what was neat is my stand was far enough back that his big circle was still inside me in the bait.
Oh.
So he never got behind me, where I think he might have picked up scent that was traveling down the tree trunk.
Yes.
But, and I do all this stuff too. And I'll rub down in sweet fern and balsam, and I'll chew balsam and get it all in my mouth.
I do
all that
all,
kind of stuff.
I literally
Soil,
chew evergreens, you name it.
Everything. So I'm doing all that. But, at the same time, then it's like, I know my firearm has lubricant in it that must be very noticeable in the woods where there's no smells like that. Anyway, he circles around.
Well, that's why I use frog lube.
Yeah,
because they like the smell of
peppermint. Yeah, it smells like something that he. So he pops around eventually, and I get the briefest view, not even his whole body, but just the briefest view, just enough to shoot. I mean, that's it. It was so dark, even through the gathering of light that I get from the scope. I'm just looking at a silhouette of him, and I know where his vitals are, but I'm not aiming at like I'll go to that crease behind his shoulder because I can't see that. I just see black.
Right.
So legal light, I take the shot, and the second, and I have a suppressed rifle.
Same.
So you can hear better. I hear a good hit. That like. So anyway, like that kind of, you popped something that was.
It makes a noise. Same with the arrows. It doesn't matter. They all make this noise.
Remember that shot I took on those deer last year?
Yeah, that's the first time I ever heard that noise.
We were at more like...
I was like, I heard a thud.
We were probably at 250
like,
yards or so. And with a suppressed rifle on a tripod, shot at a deer. So you just get that pop. It was very, it was very obvious.
It's crazy.
Cool. So anyway, I hear that, and the bear just starts running. But I'm picturing, if you had like a 400-pound dude and you put a shot through his heart and lungs, he might be able to run. But compared to a lighter weight person, the amount of energy it takes to muster that, the amount of oxygen you need to move to all of those muscles, he was so big that when he started running, all I heard was... So I immediately zip down the tree. And I draw out my pistol. So I got a Glock 19 with a X300 on it, the light.
Yes.
And I'm shooting those buffalo boar. Because of last year when we shot an HST hollow point into a bear that Mark had shot. And the bear was down on the ground, but it wasn't dead. And I handed him my pistol. He shot it in the skull, but the bullet just flattened on the skull and never penetrated. Now, luckily, that bear, he was 2 feet away from the muzzle, and that didn't penetrate. That was pretty eye-opening to me. The bear immediately appeared dead anyway at that point. He was dying anyway
at the very least, knocked completely unconscious by the impact.
Bled from the original rifle shot. So we thought the bear was dead. It wasn't until we actually took the hide off that we found that flattened bullet. So now I'm shooting these hard cast buffalo bore on my pistol. They go through and through. I killed a goat for somebody a few months ago. I was very impressed with, because these hard cast bullets don't expand, so it's just a perfect hole.
They're maintaining all of their mass.
100% of their mass.
Right, okay.
So, all right, so I have that in my hand, and I'm using the light on the pistol, and I'm holding my rifle in the other hand. I'm still wearing a climbing harness because of my safety gear and all that.
Yes.
And I'm trying to find blood. I find the blood, but now I got to follow into some thick.
But dude, people have to remember, it's incredibly dark, and the bear is invisible because it's a shadow.
Correct. And you know how an animal that is even a big animal lays down in even the shallowest depression in the woods, and they might as well be level with the ground.
It's gone because the silhouette is now gone.
It's gone. And Lawrence had just told me...
Human eye, movement, silhouette, then color.
Thank you. So Lawrence had just told me this story about a bear that he had hunted when he was younger, and his dogs had... got on it, and he had somebody, I don't know, he was guiding or something, somebody shot the bear. The bear ran ahead and laid down and played dead. And he said he was standing there in front of it at about 10 yards, and he saw his dogs come running in from behind, and as soon as he saw what was happening, he saw that the bear was going to play dead and then at the last minute start biting into these dogs. So he said he went, "Hey!" And he said the second he did that, the bear jumped up and ran straight at him. And he's like, it was on me so fast, all I could do was push the rifle forward, and he's like, I was able to put a shot right in its forehead, but it rolled over the top of him. This is a story anyway.
I could not imagine how terrifying that would be.
Pretty intense. When he tells it, it's intense. So I'm thinking like, man, is the bear dead? And I'm finding I know the shot's good. There's a lot of blood. With this light. I mean, it was nerve wracking, like just clearing a room or something. It's like till I finally found him, and then I just kept. I'm like inching up to where I can get a pistol shot on him. But I mean, eventually when we cut him, it was very clear. Somehow I got heart, both lungs, and liver, which is weird if you
just
picture
by the way it was
the angle. Yeah,
but
somehow.
But no, we did the exact same thing because part of the heart was clearly damaged. There was, I mean, not to be too gruesome, but this animal died because of not just the gross impact to the organs, but because of some exsanguination that was occurring.
Right.
There's this huge clot, this big jelly-like mass, but one of the lobes of the liver had been damaged as well.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how that happens.
Yeah,
but
you got to have the right angle. Like hit one lung high, then hit heart, then hit one lung low, and liver somehow.
Yeah,
they're all wrapped around each other. But anyway, and then once I saw him, I put another shot just to be sure, but it was very clear when I did that he was dead.
We waited, Daniel. We took the shot, and as I often do, even if it's deer hunting, and recommend to the people that come, if we're guiding, like, chill out for a minute.
Yeah.
You running down that stand and getting to the ground as fast as you can, in most cases, I say most, is not going to make a difference
Especially
of whether you get that animal or not. Relax, get your heart rate down so you can climb down carefully. We just took a moment. I started packing up some things because I want to make sure the bear is dead. I know that it was dying because of the vocalizations that it had made, but I need to give it time. And so we go out, and I asked, the person I was with to just remain behind me, and we went in as if we were dealing with a large, alive, dangerous animal. Right. And because, don't get me wrong, I would totally understand why a wounded bear, like if I was severely injured by a wounded bear that I had shot at, there will be literally no judgment on that bear.
Yeah, of course.
Right? Nor will I change my opinions about bear hunting.
Right.
I will be regretful that I allowed this to happen, but this will be 100% on me. But so moving up on the bears, even when they're lying still.
It's intense.
Yes.
It's intense. And then, looking at him, and it was funny because, before I was with Lawrence, what I like to do with him is when he's baiting the site, I'll go get in my stand because they're very used to the sound of him coming in, banging around a little bit. And when he leaves, they're like, they hear his truck go. And now I want to be in the tree then, kind of dropped off. So, but the whole time he just kept going on. I mean, I've been hunting with him now for 5 years. So, right. But he still likes to tell me all these things. You make sure that bear is dead. You come right down off that tree stand. You get right to him, put the lead to him. What else does he tell me? Just,
yeah.
Everybody says that bear's huge, Dan. Usually it's about half what they say, all this stuff. So I called him from there. Hey, can you come help me? How big's the bear? I tell him, 250. I mean, I'm looking at him like, this is a big bear, but I don't want to, I'm just going to
You want to go the other way.
I'm going to lowball it, you know what I mean? But what we ended up doing, see if you can picture this, there's that road that goes up to the mountain bait.
Yes.
And the bear was about 100, not even 100 yards, maybe 75 yards into the woods.
Mm-hmm.
We got every strap and piece of rope we had. I had the rope that I used for my climbing stand safety, right? So
yes.
It's probably a 25-foot piece of static rappelling line,
right.
black rappelling line. So I go back up there, take it out, carefully climb down because now I have no safety. Pull my truck up, and Lawrence pulls his truck up. Now we are perpendicular to where the bear is in the road.
Mm-hmm.
We put a snatch block, like a pulley?
Yes.
I put one with a carabiner on Lawrence's truck and run my 25-foot piece of rope through that, attach it to my truck.
Yes, you're
redirecting.
Redirecting
them.
Yes.
Then we have every ratchet strap. I go tie all the knots because I don't trust these guys' knots. Tie all the knots. It's all this random stuff. Now I can only pull the length of, because that stuff can't go through the pulley. So
That's right.
I can go now 25 feet up the road. They yell to me, I stop. Then I back up, they pull the rope back out. Now I get out, I remove one of the ratchet strap sections,
yes, I hear
retie,
you.
and we just inch him out and inch him out and inch him out. And then we get him finally, I drag him up to the top of that landing, and we have these amazing production lights for shooting the show. So big LED panels with batteries. So I set, we're all ready to do this, and they're like, all right, get your headlamp. And I was like, hang on, guys. I go pull out like 75,000 lumens, And then we spent the evening caping him, and we never gutted him. We took the whole hide off.
Oh, you did the gutless. Nice.
Right. And then at the end, I just reached up inside. The liver was destroyed, but I got a gallbladder out of it, which I legally transferred to Lawrence, with some paperwork.
Yes.
But I reached up inside. It's like I can feel the whole heart, and I can feel with my fingers. I can see them. I can see the heart with my fingertips inside there, like what parts are intact, what parts aren't. Get everything kind of out of him. But just the pelvis, ribs, and what was left of the spine, so the head's off, or everything else is off, just dragging that must have weighed 150 pounds.
That's insane.
Me and another dude trying to drag it into the woods, and I just didn't have enough room. I mean, I had to borrow your cooler, Grant. It was amazing how much cooler space this guy took. Yeah, it was intense. So I spent about a week processing
people
them.
often don't recognize that bears can be much larger than white-tailed deer, and with moose, and another large animal we have a lottery for, and we just seem to never get chosen. No hard feelings there.
Yeah, I know you don't sound butthurt.
The bear has the potential to offer up way more wild meat than any other animal except for the moose here in Maine. Yeah. And so it's become this really important part of the home, which makes me really grateful for the people like yourself, Lawrence, Sam, Ryan, that have made all of this a possibility.
Right. Okay, because that's what I want to go back to too. So I have, I think most of the listeners probably have heard this before, but I met Lawrence at a gas station as a new hunter. I just approached a guy with bear stickers on his truck. We became friends, and he's been apprenticing me, and he's now 72, so he's sort of on the tail end of his hunting career, and he's taken a lot of pleasure, I think, in bringing me up. But I still see myself as like an apprentice. And so, I did set up a bait one year at my house, not very successful. I really need to put the work in. I thought it was so cool because you've hunted bears a couple years less, maybe 2 years less than me. How many bears did you harvest now? Is that your
it's
4?
Yeah, it's not like a lot of bears.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm a newbie.
But I got started just 1 or 2 years before you.
Right.
But you struck out on your own, set up your bait, so you kind of have gone out on your own. I just think that's really awesome where I'm still kind of like, and it's nice to get to work with these guys, but at some point I need to do this on my own, And so I just thought it was really cool that you took that bear here at home, because now that I've got this other piece of property contiguous to my land, I'll be able to do it there. But yeah, it's cool. I'll be able to draw off some of your bait experience too, which I think will be a little bit more clear than what I've been able. You and I have read some of those bear baiting books. They're bad, man. There's like some bad literature.
I remember some of the pictures that were present in some of these, because you're looking for clues how to move through this, and there are mentors out there, but they're not always easy to find. And this one thing, it was set up, it literally looked like you were going to an expensive restaurant. There were cuts of meat and the danishes were here, and here's the bread and pig. And it's like, I don't really think that's important at all, but it was just so funny.
Also, as an author, maybe don't start sentences with "what you want to do is." It's like that's not writing, bro. Sorry.
It's yeah. It reminds me of a story that I remember someone had shared with me, where the police officer came up and said, "Well, what you should have did." Can I correct that, or is that going to be bad, and you're going to find me more things?
It's like when we bought the colostrum, and that girl's like, "I don't try different things." One of my favorite. So, what's the future like, man? Are you? Because now we're in late September. We got friends coming out from Wisconsin. You're going to get a New Hampshire tag this year? Are you done with bears for the year?
Oh, no. If Sam and or Ryan are coming and we're all hunting, together, New Hampshire tag is it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Was your bear lean?
No. But it also wasn't fat. It didn't have the amount that you would necessarily take the time to render, but it was starting to accumulate. It was a nice, healthy boar.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
We had, you saw Grant, because Grant was like, he was so cool. It was like, "Grant, will you come over and help me butcher this?" And like, you did, I saw you some meat. But anyway, he saw, there was some of those like 6-inch thick.
Oh, yeah.
2 armload slabs of fat where it all came off. Because, I've had years.
It was not like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, I mean, it's
still very, and it's also still early in the year.
But man, right on the butt, right? It's where it all is.
Yeah.
That big round bear butt.
It's like a camel hump that doesn't stick out.
Correct. Yeah.
You don't notice it until the hide comes off, and there's this big pad of fat.
And keeping it off the hide, because the fat comes off very easily onto the hide, where it's like trying not to lose it to the hide.
Well, we brain tan the hides.
Man, that's awesome.
And Sarah has made vests, one for Farah and one for Samara.
So rad.
And
wait, didn't Sarah say she was going to brain tan a hide for me? I have one now.
Yeah, and but the thing is that part of this brain tanning process, we literally need to wash them in soap.
To get all
multiple
that fat
times, because the brain dressing will never penetrate with
through
all
the
that
oil.
fat. That's
through
right.
The oil.
It'll repel it. So we're using like a Dr. Bronner, Sal Suds type.
Need lots of detergent, basically.
But we literally and if we didn't have that, it would be a wood ash
I wonder
solution.
about pressure washing some of that off if it would strip out.
But there's absolutely no way it's getting brain tanned at all. It's already not like deer.
Yeah.
It's much more rigid.
It's so different. It's so different.
But if we didn't do that, we'd get nowhere. It would still be rawhide.
Yeah, wow. Avani, she loves to take care of, when I get done cutting, it's like all, I have all that industrial kitchen equipment, like big sheet pans and hotel pans that I use for this and all that, and the coolers. And she's so awesome. She's like, she'll wash all that for me when I'm done.
Oh my God.
So nice, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, this time I had all those coolers out there, and she's kind of keeping an eye. Like, I know I'm going to have to wash those because they are looking glistening with oil, externally and blood. And then, like, I had to go get another cooler out. Then I got Grant. She's watching the cooler pile grow and grow and grow. And they're so slick with
Daniel,
oil.
I love you, but so the one thing that's been taking up the time is that friends have asked for assistance with a moose hunt. So so we're going to Wildlife Management District number 4, which is northwestern Maine.
Awesome. It's perfect zone.
I'm going. I've scouted an area a bit. I'm going to go multiple days ahead.
Whose tag is it?
To finish scouting.
Whose tag? Give me just the first name.
Yeah, Janet.
Okay, I don't know.
And her husband TJ is a friend that I met a decade ago or so, maybe a little more. Great people, but maybe like I don't want to claim that I am an experienced moose guide because I'm not, but I grew up in moose country.
You're pretty experienced at finding moose.
And so I'm hoping this pays off. And they've asked for help, and I want that experience, and so we're doing it.
Cool.
We've Sarah and I built a birch bark moose call and have been nothing but practicing and trying to get. The most important thing is to be consistent.
Yeah.
So that your calls don't change too much.
Right.
Or like, what the fuck is that?
I don't want to belabor this on the podcast, but I would love to chat with you later about your strategy for getting them out, because every year
it's being broken down into tiny
right in the
pieces.
field.
Yep.
I want to get a lot better at this with the bears.
We don't have. There's no ATVs allowed in this area, and in fact, we're coming from an area northwest of Moosehead Lake where I don't have like childhood level experience, and so the only way that we're going to be successful is we have to get to the washouts in some of the old road beds, and then go a mile further where other people aren't willing to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, which means packing out.
And when we're going to have to pack it out.
Which is hard because you want to take all those bones, but it's like, we're going to carry that rib cage. It's like cutting all the meat out from between the ribs probably and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Because we're going to be, it'll be 3 of us, hopefully 4 of us. So there's another person who's offered to stick around for a couple of days of the hunt to help out, who's going with me to do some scouting. And, but it costs money to go to the North Maine woods. There's the gate fee, the camping fees. But if you succeed, it's worth it. But otherwise, you've invested hundreds of dollars, and it just vanishes, except for your experiences.
Yeah. Wow, that's a lot of ground. I'm looking forward to bear hunting with you this year. And,
I can't wait. I can't wait.
I can't either. And I just want to say that I feel more infused with that power that you were talking about before, that Indigenous folks had recognized, in our region or in Sweden where you're talking about, or just that what we inherently know about, just and feel about bears. I feel that more and more in myself, and it comes from these interactions, and it doesn't come, and I guess that's what I was trying to go back to before, it doesn't come from just simple observation. It comes from this interaction, this lethal interaction. I think has really, like, when people try to say things to me about bears that don't have this experience, it's like, sorry, I just don't think you really know how I know bears. Like, you can't judge how I know bears. I have lots of these experiences now, and they've accumulated in me, and I have bones made out of bear meat in my body, like, it's in my heart, and it's in my soul now.
Yeah, I'm about to go eat bear.
Right, exactly. That's it.
That bear those bears' tissues partly make up my tissue.
That's it.
And you can't fathom that. Because we have a hyper-individual focused society, and we don't focus on the collective anymore, right? What's good for the community? So what's good for the individual?
Right.
So we can't imagine that you could kill a bear and have love for that animal, because we're focused on the individual.
Right.
Yet if you see the rest of my life and what I'm doing to try to protect habitat for bears, I'm focused on the collective, folks. And if you don't understand that, before you come at me, please understand what a community level focus is and how we can actually hunt animals and still support their well-being, because we're focused on collective.
And if and at the risk of this being a 10-hour podcast, it's like when you hear folks who come from societies closer to the land, they'll refer to things like the spirit of the bear. They don't mean the spirit of that individual bear. They mean the archetype that's the progenitor of all the bears. So I am in deep relationship with, I don't want to say the bear spirit, because I'm afraid it'll sound pretentious, and contentious. But what I mean is that progenitor archetype that represents all of the bears. Even though I kill bears, I feel like I'm in deep relationship with that spirit, and that's how I can justify loving and also killing this animal.
I'd just like to point out that the word Arthur comes from Arctos, which is bear, so
you're good.
I'm good. My name means bear.
That's funny. Yeah, I like that.
And I didn't learn that until pretty late in life, but it was a cool thing to learn.
That's when I decided I'm going to hunt bears. Just so that people know what you offer out here. It would be cool. I know you got like a very rich and sort of diverse life here, but maybe you could explain some of the key things that you hold open for people to be involved in.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people are aware that we do weekend-long classes here.
Not everybody.
Oh, okay. Well, we offer weekend-long classes here, and most of those are plant-based.
They are some of the very best in the world, man. I mean,
you've been part of those classes, actually the same class sometimes for multiple years.
Because that spring one's real good.
Yeah, that's our favorite. And so these are weekend-long foraging classes that we do right here out of Wilder Waters community. And again, they tend to be plant-focused, foraging, and also wildcrafting herbal medicines. But I don't like being limited to the plants. And part of the reason that you and I went through this guide program was because we don't want to be just these people. We want to be the whole hunter-gatherer. My dream is to be that mentor one day,
right?
You know, and I really like how you and I don't wear any guide patches right now.
I know, and I'd love to.
Oh yeah,
I would love to.
But there's no stickers.
I like me some patches. No, I have a sticker on my truck now.
Oh, you do?
It gives you legitimacy in certain circles.
I totally get it.
I don't put one on my hunting truck, the black truck.
Yeah,
I put it on the gray truck because that's the one I'm in urban environments with, and that's the one where I'm interacting with.
It's gotten us permission a few times.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it's like, I'm a Maine guide. People are like, come on in, use my land.
I have used that to get access before. Yeah, like just so that you understand, because it represents somebody who's gone through a peer review process in Maine.
Different states have a different level of rigor.
Open up. The idea that maybe you have a higher set of ethics.
Yeah, right.
And so you and I, even though we have started guiding fishing trips, which we do, Sarah and I lead a trip usually to Moosehead Lake. We want to do
That's ice fishing?
Yeah, Chemquassabamtcook Lake coming up, hopefully this year. We've talked to the outfitters there and figured out how we want to do it, and that's great. But I'm still like I'm relatively new to the idea of being a Maine guide, so I've been taking your stance. I'll wait until it's been some years, and I'm like, I got this now, and then I'll put the patch on.
Because you don't want to bump into somebody who's like, I've been a guide for 37 years in the state. When did you start? I never seen you.
It's been 2 years. And because I recognize those people. We may disagree on some philosophical viewpoints, but they have deep ecological knowledge.
Yeah, exactly. So, that I'd like to have.
Yeah. And so, but we also, as you know, have a communal living scenario where we grow and shrink through the years. And that communal living can come. People don't have to live here. They can live nearby and participate with us and get to know us and decide if this is a fit for them. But the most successful program, and the one that I've really liked the most, is we started an apprenticeship program where people come and stay with us for a moon at a time. And it's wonderful because they participate in what we are participating in.
Right.
Which is, there's always foraging, there's always wildcrafting.
Must be nice, too, because I imagine that gets you doing a little bit more than maybe even would always happen.
It makes sure
that motivation.
That's there. Although sometimes, interestingly enough, depending on what they're interested in, we sometimes do less foraging because maybe they're interested in focusing on some ancestral skill sets that keep us nearby, working.
So do you do kind of a la carte with those based on what person wants to learn, or how does that work?
It's both. Yeah. Certainly, I try to honor some of their wishes, but we're also, this is what we're doing. And so if you, we have hunted a bear. The next few days, we're taking care of this bear.
Right. So that was your apprentice in the blind.
Yes.
So he gets this whole immersive experience, nose to tail with this bear.
He's been through the entire process.
That's awesome.
And will be eating it with us. You know what I mean?
And I'm sure dozens of other things that have
Yeah,
have
yeah.
happened really soon.
Some of the apprentices want to be kind of a little bit more of the communal living, and so they even are assisting with some of our tasks, which would include childcare, and others are more. I'm kind of interested in what I'm interested in. As we go forward, we might push that a little bit more toward you're kind of here as part of the community, because I feel like we're doing an incredibly competitive price compared to what people get, and so we need a little bit more from you than just this fee, so that people are aware that that's part of what's probably coming. But we've had every single person who has showed up so far has been wonderful to deal with. It's so weird. As soon as we asked people to pay money to come here,
ding, ding, ding,
it all changed.
Yeah, in a positive way.
In a very positive way.
Because they have skin in the
we
game.
had a family here that we're like, we can live with.
Yeah.
And they're wonderful people.
Finally.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things. And of course there's social media outlets and stuff like that.
Yeah, you run a pretty popular plant-based group on Facebook, right? That's your Ancestral Plants. You've got your books, many books, fantastic stuff. So that's all out there. I feel like there's more.
And a new path is about to sell out.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think there's 60 copies left.
Are you going to reprint, or that's it?
I don't want to deal with the selling anymore.
It's going to be worth like $10,000
so
on eBay.
I need to find another publisher who's willing to pick it up.
Yeah.
Because, we have a friend who's been fulfilling orders, and sometimes we're doing it, and we simply don't have time. Yeah. We need that all taken care of by somebody else.
The other book is Ancestral Plants, right?
Yep.
It's 2 parts.
Yeah, Ancestral Plants 2. I saw it
Volume
on
1
eBay,
and 2.
I think, for like $2,000. It's like, what the heck?
So awesome.
Yeah, it's sold out, and so people, it's like, you can just get the e-version for $11.
Well, I'm going to plug you just one more time and say that if you can get out to work with Arthur at any level, it's always this interesting thing, because I consider you my really good friend and on equal footing in a lot of ways. And then in other ways, I really consider you a mentor, and you're somebody who I constantly, the other day, do I have this plant right, Arthur? Sending me pictures. So, really my mentor in a lot of ways too. So anyway, if you can get out to work with him, honestly, wherever you are in the country, I think his foraging classes will benefit you when you go home, even if it's a different suite of plants, because so much of technique and processing is similar. So, and then I just really recommend his books. And again, just whatever you can do. It's cool to see the apprenticeship going. You know what I was thinking about the other day? 2 last things I want to say. These are my final things.
Swear to God.
This is it. When we were in the jungle in Peru, and we were with that shaman the day after our ceremony.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember, you may not remember what he told me. I remember he told you that your plant was Datura, and that was a pretty interesting road that took you down. He told me that there was a guy that would come into my life that would assist me in my vision, and that it would help me to bring my work out into the world. And I was like, really waited for that for a while, until I was like, it's not happening. I don't know why he said that.
I do remember.
And then Mr. Grant comes along and starts working with me, and now here we are stepping into a licensing agreement with our show that we built together.
That's so cool.
It's just amazing to me. I mean, because I could not have done this by myself,
right?
And I could not have done it the way I wanted to with any of these production companies as they are currently. And it's something that Grant's unique talent and ability, and it's been awesome to watch pros watch his footage and go, dude, this is really good.
Yeah, it's been pretty cool.
It's been pretty cool.
It is good to get that confirmation. I can totally understand that.
The other thing I wanted to say was, I remember a few years ago, you and I were getting really close to doing a project together. We were going to do something bigger together, and we were starting to look at this idea of doing kind of like a mastermind type thing. And then that's when Grant and I met. And I started to go, what do you think about doing like a TV show? And you were like, man, I'm kind of thinking more of doing like an apprentice thing where we can do more of the primitive living. And you and I kind of was like, okay. And then we sort of bifurcated off. And and now you're doing that here. And I'm doing this show with Grant. And it's like, we talked about it. It happened. And a couple years later, here's the fruits of it. And so it's so awesome that we get to come together and work together like this. But from afar, I'm looking at what you're doing going like, wow, he's really advancing this idea he had all those years ago. So congratulations. That's really awesome.
I needed to figure out a way to do that, and I couldn't accomplish that without Sarah being here.
Yeah, it's cool how you've been able to integrate that with your family, with your passion.
She's also doing some of the teaching.
Yeah, right.
You know, it's like, oh, we're doing autumn olives today, and this is how we process, and off they go.
Not to mention she's a major motivator to you, I can see.
Oh my God, are you kidding?
She's the one who's like...
Because if you don't bring wild meat, we're done.
Yeah, it's over between us.
And she's doing hide tanning with people and stuff.
Yeah.
And
she's super motivated.
Yeah, so she's helping, but she takes care of all of the like, oh God, somebody just sent this question. I got it.
Yeah.
And taking and like literally shielding me from some of the stuff that it doesn't make sense to spend time on.
Right. You needed someone to do that to you. You will answer every hater at length. I'm like, what are you doing? You could be writing books with this. Why are you answering these people? It's like, thank God.
I gotta understand them. It's like you said, you've had a chessboard put in front of you, and you're trying to figure out the solution. And so now I'm trying to find ways to disarm them.
It's like that thing you said to me is, I might not be the best wrestler out there, but no one can get me to submit.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your time today.
I'm so glad that you guys included me, because it was there are some really cool stories to tell today.
And I'm looking forward to hearing about your moose hunt.
Let's hope it's successful.
Thanks for listening to the WildFed Podcast. You can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review. It ensures better rankings and more advertiser interest, which translates directly into better shows, more awesome guests, and a constant stream of fresh, new content. Have a question you'd like answered on the show, or a hunting, fishing, or foraging trip you'd like to host us on? Email us at info@wild-fed.com. And be sure to visit our website, wild-fed.com, to check out the WildFed video show and store. WildFed. Food is all around you.